Listen, you smell something?
Human emotions are materializing in the form of a viscous psychoreactive plasm with explosive supernormal potential.
What a discovery, a psychoreactive substance.
Do you know what this equipment is used for?
Boggle or Super Mario Brothers?
We'll have fun!
Yeah! They're still doing it. Really quite good work there.
My friend, don't be a jerk.
We've got no choice. Call the Ghostbusters.
Super Jackpot!
Welcome to Extraplasm Podcast. It's the only podcast on the internet that wants to advocate for new, non-traditional food storage items for the next Ghostbusters movie instead of popcorn buckets, like a Ghostbusters-themed trap-shaped red box, or a Ghostbusters slime-themed pickle canning jar set, or even the Ghostbusters Ecto-Containment Rotary Pancake Plasm and Syrup Containment Unit. I'm your host, Jim Maritato, aka Vank Maniac on the internet, and while I have terrible ideas on how to market things to store maple syrup that are Ghostbusters themed, I have great ideas of people who we can talk to on this show, and this week we're joined by a newcomer to the show, but not to the realm of Ghostbusters fandom. Matt Daniels of the Experience Explorers YouTube channel joins us this week to chat about his behind-the-scenes coverage of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire filming in NYC, as well as his partnership developing video packages for our friends at the Ecto-1NJ, and his time at the premiere, where we had the first chance to meet face-to-face, and like so much more. Matt's somebody I've had the chance to get to know via social media over the last year, and who is one of the fun folks running with Nick from Ecto-1NJ and Greg the Ecto-Tech on a regular basis. But he's also a Ghostbusters fan from the UK who moved to NYC with his own YouTube channel documenting a ton of cool Ghostbusters and pop cultural experiences. So I'm really excited to bring that conversation to you this week and to highlight some behind the scenes coverage of the stunt driving in NYC that you might not have seen before, especially if you were avoiding that kind of stuff in the lead up to the movie, because it's stuff that Matt was able to capture back in June of 2023. Or you may have seen it and wondered, who did such a fantastic job shooting this stuff? And today you'll get to find out. So we'll go to that conversation with Matt in a few minutes. But before we can do that, we need to talk about some Ghostbusters headlines.
Still making headlines all across the country, the Ghostbusters are at it again.
Today, the entire eastern seaboard is alive with talk of incidents of paranormal activity.
On topic today, ghosts and ghost busting.
Extraplasm, read all about it. Ghostbusters headlines coming at ya.
In Ghostbusters Frozen Empire news, we all hoped that the film's successful first weekend run would carry into week 2, but it seems that the opening of the new Godzilla x Kong movie, which makes no sense in my brain whatsoever, left Frozen Empire outmatched at the box office inexplicably, as that film brought in over $80 million in its opening weekend, which put quite a drop-off in ticket sales into the hopper for Frozen Empire over the Easter weekend than we might have anticipated. I don't know, to me, Easter sounds more like family-friendly film, right, weekend than giant kaiju lizard and giant ape stomp on things weekend. But I digress, to each their own. Despite the drop-off in domestic ticket sales, the film has still made $73 million here in the US, and abroad it has had additional box office revenue that's led it to a total of $108 million in revenue so far. That's just on ticket sales and box office. There's a lot we could say about this, as there's rumors that the film's budget was about $100 million. So, $108 million is not exactly all that profitable, if profitable at all, when you start to think about how much money might have been spent on marketing. With as many posters and trailers as we saw, Times Square moving advertisements, TV spots, YouTube ads that seem to outpace the number that we had from Afterlife, that's probably not a small chunk of change. But it's also worth considering that the film still stands to make money in box office revenue, in revenue from licensed merchandise and toys and things of that nature. And the fate of media in the era of streaming and digital rentals may not be best viewed by the first 2 weeks of box office earnings alone. By that I mean that you have things like streaming rights that will be sold off later on for certain platforms to be able to show this movie that will be additional revenue that Sony's able to attain. You're going to have digital rentals that people will make of this movie that will generate some revenue for Sony. And there are all these different ways of generating revenue that exist after the movie leaves theaters is still stuff that can help it to be profitable. And we've all heard of movies that have become successful because they succeed on home video rather than succeeding as largely on screens at first. And personally, I think that as you sort of watch people see this movie in theaters and then go talk about how fun it was to others who then go see it, it's got more of a slow burn to it that may still generate, more revenue as we move forward. So do I have a strong take on what these numbers mean? Not really. I think regardless of whether the movie is a massive box office earner, it's a good story. It's got legs as a movie that spreads by word of mouth, and the forthcoming cartoon media potentially opens up the world of Ghostbusting to the most important fans that the franchise probably needs to mobilize, and that a PG-13 movie may not actually motivate or mobilize. If we want the narrative to remain culturally relevant, that means that we need to start reaching a younger audience, so sort of getting to kids. And I'm eager to see what the animation series is going to look like, as well as what Frozen Empire may still stand to earn in home video and stream content licensing. And so, sort of the jury is still out in my mind in terms of whether or not you consider this a financial success. I think we're still in the we'll see, but I don't think you can call it a financial failure at this point. But speaking of home video, last week we were talking about the opportunity to pre-order the movie on Blu-ray, digital, and 4K Ultra HD discs, which to me is sort of crazy. There's a variety of different packages and steelbooks that are going to be available for purchase. And it's almost to me like instant cassettes from Spaceballs because the movie's still in theaters, but we're talking about, what you're going to be able to buy in terms of a home media release pretty soon, I guess. We don't have a date yet. But Ghostbusters News reports that artist Chrissy Chung shared the artwork that she's designed for the 4K Steelbook. If you want to get a peek at what that may look like and what may emblazon the cover of your Steelbook later on this year when you get it, head over to Ghostbusters News and take a look at the story that he's titled Full Artwork for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire's upcoming 4K UHD Steelbook. Say that 10 times fast. And if by some chance you haven't actually ordered it yet, feel free to click the link in the article to take you over to Amazon and pre-order it while you still can. Remember that if you're ordering something on Amazon, you'll get the Amazon price guarantee. So even if the price on that comes down somehow in the next few months, you'll still get it at the cheapest opportunity. So from my standpoint, it always makes sense to just buy it from Amazon because nobody's going to charge you less for it or more for it, I guess. Maybe they'll charge you more for it, but nobody's going to charge you less than Amazon will. And if they somehow do, you can go back to them and go, dude, you didn't uphold your guarantee. While the movie's now out in theaters, though, and we're talking about some home releases, one of the most exciting things that I think we have to start talking about after the movie's release, especially for us as hardcore fans, is that we can start digging into way more behind the scenes content that's either becoming available or has been available for a while. I've been joking for a few weeks that I stayed away from the tested YouTube channel for a while because I didn't want to have too much spoiled for me in the movie, but now that the movie's out, I'm able to go take a look at those things. And I think many of you are going to take a look at those things too. And we're going to get into a few different pieces that I think, in social media that you can go take a look at that are really interesting from the past week. Of course, you should definitely go take a look at everything that Matt Daniels from Experience Explorers, who's our guest this week, has put out there because he's got a ton of great stuff on his channel. But this week, Adam Savage's Tested series resumed, posting stuff from the Frozen Empire set. And this week, they offered a set tour of the living quarters inside of the Ghostbusters firehouse that I found incredibly interesting because of how detailed this set is, despite how little of it we kind of get to see over the course of the movie. We get to see the ground floor, obviously. We get to see some angles of the living quarters, but we don't get to see like each person's individual bedroom, etc. But all of those things were created for the movie, which is wild to me. I don't want to spoil anything here because I think this is such a cool video that shows off a ton of great detail that shows just how meticulously this set was designed. But I want you to go take a look at it because there's so many cool references and Easter eggs in there that will make you want to zoom in while saying enhance over and over again. And along for the ride in that video is production designer Eve Stewart, who's talking with Adam Savage and explaining out, the strategies of what they were trying to do in terms of designing the set and these different particular, things they included that were references or callbacks to other things. So you can really spend an entire afternoon digging through the entire series of tested episodes at this point and pausing and zooming in and looking at stuff. But you really got to go take a look at this video because it's pretty amazing. And speaking of YouTube and set tours, our friends over at Yes Have Some Podcast continued their Firehouse Fridays series at the end of this past week. This time with a brief tour of the Firehouse basement and containment unit, the research lab facility, which is freaking amazing. You probably have more detailed shots there of what the ionic separator looks like from that video than you might from the movie itself, as well as the Manhattan Adventurer Society banquet room, the exterior set that was used for compositing the New York Public Library, and a ton more. You can check that out over on the Yes Have Some YouTube channel, which you can easily find by going to youtube.com/@YHS podcast. There's probably more coming from that Firehouse Fridays series. And even if there's not, YHS has great content every week that's Ghostbusters oriented that you should be checking out because they had that opportunity to go visit the set in London. And they are still, I think, unpacking stories that they have been sitting on for many, many months and they couldn't really talk about. But beyond the YouTube stuff, there's individual production staff who are now able to come out and start talking about what they were doing over the last few months or the last year. Many of the folks who had non-disclosure agreements that were in place until after the movie was released are now able to talk about their experiences. And so you're starting to see some different, contributors to Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, whether they were folks who did set design or costume design or other things, who are starting to talk publicly about their experiences and tell their story because they can. And so there's 2 Instagram accounts I want you to know about because they're kind of awesome. One of them belongs to costume designer Alexis Forte, and the other belongs to art director Luke Whitelock. As Ghostbusters News reported earlier this week, Alexis Forte has posted detailed photos and explanations of the iconic red parkas and the engineering flight suits on her Instagram account that you've got to take a look at, especially because there's things on that engineering suit that I had never noticed in any of the 4 screenings of the movie that I've seen. While that looks like the same flight suit that we've seen many times just in a different color, it turns out there are a number of modifications made, including like a shadow elbow reinforcement on one arm, more pockets for equipment that really look like they took the arm patch that's underneath like the Velcro flap on one of those flight suits on the left arm and took it off of one suit and then sewed it onto the breast pocket of another and adds in space to hold tools. They swapped out the Velcro fasteners on the flight suits for brass. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different little things that are just slight differences that almost you think about and you go, well, those are the kind of sensible improvements that you'd make on the flight suit in a, in a research and engineering division. And they also, Alexis Forte gets into the parka and sort of talking about how it was designed, what was behind that, etc. And that's all, through images and essentially like photo essays where she's publishing each of the images and then writing commentary with each of the images she's publishing. So go take a look at that. You can go find her content at Alexis_Forte_costumes on Instagram. And as for Luke Whitelock, look, I said way back when this movie was called Firehouse, when we saw McKenna Grace exit the firehouse interior onto the street set in one contiguous shot where the camera followed her, that I did not understand how this could be achieved, that I needed to one day be able to talk with the person who figured out how to magically fit the interior of LA Fire Station Engine 23 inside of NYFD's Hook and Ladder 8, given that one building is way longer than the other and the other one is wider. And so it turns out that Luke Whitelock is that guy. If you take a look at his Instagram page, Whitelock_design_limited, he's been sharing a ton of video content showing how the firehouse was designed from digital architectural designs to the way they used 5 different colors of green tile, weathering, and a hammer to recreate the look and feel of the firehouse's aged green tiles. I mean, there's even one post in there that if you look carefully, you can go through and find the picture where he identifies the 5 different specific colors they used for those tiles and the manufacturer and distributor. So like, I'm going to need to get me a box of tiles for real because I just need to have them because I've talked so much about the green tiles of the LA Firehouse that I really hope we can see again someday, to know that these amazing replicas that they created, like the source materials for that, are out there. To know how to get it is nuts. So there's so much content he's putting out there that I'm confident he could fill a book of his own. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, my dreams will come true. Maybe I'll actually get to talk to Luke about how he pulled off the greatest magic trick that we may have ever seen in Ghostbusters, but you're just going to have to keep listening to Extraplasm to see if that happens. In the meantime, though, make sure you're following Whitelock_design_limited. A final piece of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire news, or at least something tangentially related because it's happening at a Sony facility on the tail end of Frozen Empire's media tour. If you're in the Chicago area on April 8th, Dan Aykroyd will be making an appearance at Sony Wonderverse, the new entertainment complex Sony's developed with virtual and augmented reality experiences, and that includes the Ghostbusters VR offerings from Hologate. And of course, it also includes the stunning Ghost Trap Speakeasy Bar. This is something that's being promoted through the official Ghostbusters channel, so I'll kind of call this something that is Frozen Empire related, but Dan Aykroyd's going to be at the Wonderverse from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Central Time on Monday, in February. That's not the month we're in, April 8th. And he's going to be promoting Crystal Head Vodka, as well as obviously Ghostbusters. They are going to have a variety of different benefits for people who are able to come to that. The first 50 legally aged drinkers through the door will receive a complimentary drink. There's also prizes, free gameplay opportunities, $8 curated Crystal Head cocktails, and of course, good old Uncle Dan inside the Ghost Trap Bar. And if you live in the Chicago area and you've ever wanted to have a drink in the same room as Dan Aykroyd, let's be real, this is your chance. As for whether or not he'll be signing autographs or taking photos is unclear, but I would imagine that being in this adoptive home of the Ghostbusters, surrounded by the ephemera of this successful paranormal franchise, the spirits, be they ectoplasmic or alcoholic in nature, may move him, cadets. In Ghostbusters comic book news, Ghostbusters Back in Town is now available in stores. The first issue was released last Wednesday, coincidentally the same day as our last podcast, and there was a small launch event that took place in California's beautiful San Fernando Valley at We Can Be Heroes Comics in Chatsworth. This was a fun event that had the LA Ghostbusters on hand for meet and greets, along with David Boer, the book's author, Kevin Mangold, who you may better know as Slimer in Frozen Empire, Mark Brian Wilson and Robin Shelby, who you may know as Slimer from Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 respectively, and of course, Mr. Stay Puft himself, Billy Bryan. I had an opportunity to meet and chat with each of these people, and you just may hear from one or more of them on upcoming episodes of Extraplasm. In fact, David Boer will be joining us for next week's episode to talk more in depth about the comic book and what's to come from Dark Horse. So I'm not going to spoil anything here about the first issue, and I'm going to leave some room here for us to come back and talk about the comic book next week when David is with us. But the book is out now. David's very nice and awesome. You should support the book and definitely pick it up because you should support him, because you should support Ghostbusters, because all of that's a great idea. And of course, the reason you should get the first book is because it's the first one in a 4-part miniseries that bridges the gap between the Somerville story we had in Afterlife and the trip, out to NYC. And it really tells the story of the Ghostbusters moving back into the firehouse and completing their first busts as a newly formed team, and as people trying to figure out, what are they? Are they just a group of ragtag people who moved from Oklahoma, or are they becoming the family that we start to see in Frozen Empire? So if you haven't already got it, go out and grab the book now from your local comic book store. It's going to set you back less than $5. And, you're going to be part of an ongoing story that continues out until June, because this is something that even though Frozen Empire will leave theaters, we will have a story that continues to be told out until the middle of summer. And who knows, there may be more of these to come. We're going to potentially find out, especially when we have David on next week. We may get to talk with him a bit more about what may come after this, if anything. So make sure you're going out there and supporting the comic book. Help it to succeed so that way we can get more Ghostbusters stories to be told as a result. And a final thing I'll say here is I just want to say thank you to Stephen Shea and the LA Ghostbusters, as well as We Can Be Heroes Comics, for making this a fun event, for being great hosts, and of course to all the signers and the attendees for coming out and giving us their time. It was a really cool opportunity to come out and get some face time with folks who really care about Ghostbusters and help to make it what it is. In Ghostbusters merchandise news, Hasbro has had a pretty busy week. First, they revealed that they are going to be doing another run of the Transformers and Ghostbusters crossover figure Ectotron. That's a figure that was first revealed to us 5 years ago to celebrate the then 35th anniversary of Ghostbusters way back in 2019. And it's now coming back again, perhaps to celebrate the 40th. If this is a figure you've missed out on before, you may be able to pick this up at retailers soon. It is currently sold out on Hasbro Pulse, which gives me some serious questions about how many of these got sold out so quickly and who needed this that badly. But to be fair, it is the original version rather than the Afterlife variant that they did in 2021 and that kind of sat around a little more. So there may be some folks out there who missed the original colorway on this and who now have an opportunity to pick it up. And then on Friday of last week, the Target exclusivity on the Kenner Classics Fright Features figures that we were all chasing 2 months ago finally ended, meaning those figures became available at Hasbro Pulse, at Amazon, and likely at other retailers that I have not yet found them. But if you've been hunting inside Target stores for months and you've turned up no figures in your area, check Amazon and Hasbro Pulse, because you may be able to have those shipped to you at this point. And if you do it on Amazon, you might even spend $4 less per figure than you might have at Target, in my case. And then the big announcement came on Saturday at WonderCon, where Hasbro Pulse had a panel announcing some upcoming products for Q2 2024. And the big announcement is actually for something small, or at least smaller than we've seen offered before. Hasbro will be offering a 4-pack of Ghostbusters 3 3/4 inch action figures in O-ring style, meaning with the O-rings in their waists to hold them together in the same style as the 80s G.I. Joe figures, which is pretty cool because, to be real, they've never been offered in that platform ever by anybody. So this is like something that, as much as some folks are going, it's the same 4 guys, it is the same 4 guys, but it is also the same 4 guys at a completely different scale that matches and partners up with lots of other stuff. You know, I recognize like the Mego figures when they came out. I went, well, okay, those are 4 of the same guys at a different scale than we've had before, but what do they go with? But when I look at these figures, like a 3.75 inch scale is awesome because it means that your figures can go with any of your G.I. Joe collection. That means your figures can go with any of your Super 7 figures that have like tons, like all those reaction figures that exist out there from like different 80s movies and stuff. These figures can go alongside in your display case and they're going to look great. So, you know, we're getting G.I. Joe Ghostbusters, which is kind of amazing. And if that wasn't enough, we're getting an Ecto-1 they're going to fit inside of. And you all know how I feel about this. Like, I still need my 112 Ecto-1 so that my Maddie Collector, my Plasma Series figures have something to drive that isn't a popcorn bucket. Although, shout out to, Cinemark, because the new version of the Ecto-1 bucket they did is quite nice, and I got mine, and the packaging is really good. But it doesn't really roll, and that's why we still need a car that really rolls. Do you hear me, Hasbro? Are you listening? But beyond that, they must be listening to something, because we are getting an Ecto-1 that these 3 3/4 inch action figures are going to fit inside of. Now, to be real, this is sort of a retooling of an existing Ecto-1 that many of us have, because they're essentially taking the 1/18 scale Ecto-1 from Afterlife. They removed the gunner seat from it. They've changed out the steering wheel so that way some, action figure's legs can probably fit underneath it and what have you, and essentially made changes to the car to return it back to the way it was in 1984 in the first movie, undoing all those changes that were done for Afterlife. So it's a retooling of that model that will allow the proton packs it's going to come with to fit inside of the gurney space in the back. It's going to support the figures, etc. So this is something that we will be able to pre-order apparently on Ghostbusters Day of this year. So it's not yet available for us to do anything, but you can check out some really good high quality preview images of this over on Ghostbusters News because Jason's got them. You can also find them on the Yes Have Some podcast, Instagram, or social media accounts. I don't have them because nobody sent them to me, but that's why you can go look at the places that have them. But to be real, I'm a little more excited about this than I thought I would be when I first heard people like sort of tell me, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have like a 3 3/4 inch thing? I was like, I don't know, maybe it might be cool. It was something I heard murmuring around, people saying, wouldn't that be cool if we had it? And I went, yeah, I mean, it's just the same 4 guys. But then actually seeing them made me realize how much potential there is to do stuff with them. Like, they're highly posable. They're going to fit with all these pre-existing accessories from all these different lines that, are 3 3/4 inch, which is pretty amazing. And it's like filling a gap, especially if you're a 3 3/4 inch collector. Like, this is something that hasn't existed as much as, for folks who've wanted them for a really long time, in the same way that I really want my Ecto-1. So I get it. Like, I understand why these are cool for people who want them. Beyond that, I'll say this. If you don't want these, like, I've seen a lot of negativity about these and people saying things like, Hasbro just isn't doing anything, or they just don't want our money, which is always the funniest thing to read. Like, yeah, that's what the company doesn't want, your money. That's why they made the decisions. But like, realistically, I've seen a lot of backlash. Like, Hasbro's not throwing any love at the movie. They say they need a movie in order to market toys, and then they didn't put out any toys for the movie. Like, yeah, they did. They put out like the Fright Features line and what have you. But they also said during this WonderCon presentation, like several times, that they would be announcing more stuff on Ghostbusters Day. So, I got to be honest. This may be an unpopular take, but like, I'm glad we don't have a Plasma series right now. I've bought a lot of popcorn buckets. I'm tapped out. I got a little bit of merchandise burnout, to be honest with you, on Frozen Empire stuff, and I kind of need a breather. And so to me, in a way, like, these are kind of a nice breathing space to go, hey, in June, you're going to be able to put something in your collection that is 40th anniversary oriented. It's something from the 84 movie. And then, maybe you're going to find out in June too, that there's things that are going to be released still to support Frozen Empire based off of what was and wasn't successful. I mean, it's weird to think about this, but imagine if you got at this point a Paul Rudd action figure from Plasma series where he was wearing the red coat. you know that somebody's first complaint on that would be, that's not screen accurate. He doesn't ever actually wear the red coat in the movie. So like to me, I'm like, let Hasbro have some breathing space at this point to decide what's best for the line to keep it going. I think that we likely still will see some more stuff later this year. And the final thing Hasbro offered up as a really cool thing in that WonderCon presentation about Ghostbusters is that apparently, according to Emily from the Hasbro team, they got back the engineering samples for the PKE meter, and the EMF detection works really well, and they're really excited about it. So if you need to find, EM leaks in your house, you're going to have another tool for that. And it will also, of course, let you shock ghosts, because that's how that works. So a lot of things here I think that Hasbro has suddenly revealed to us, if not revealed to us a lot of new things, they've made more stuff available. They've taken stuff that was sort of behind, a particular exclusivity agreement, and it's now something we can get better access to for folks who don't have a Target in their area. And look, more Ghostbusters toys and more formats is good. It means that potentially if you get 3.75 inch Ghostbusters figures, who knows? Maybe you get Ghostbusters 2 figures. Maybe you get other things that can be made from the same mold. And those are kind of like figures that are super, super like interchangeable. You can make a buck out of them the same way that Mattel would with some Plasma Series figures and just, swap out arms and heads and things. So totally opens up possibilities. There's nothing bad about this. For anybody who thinks there is, I'm sorry. I just don't agree with you. I think this creates better opportunities for us as fans because it gives us a new platform to collect. While we're months away from Halloween and Christmas, rest assured that the options are in the work for different retailers to celebrate both Frozen Empire and the 40th anniversary. For Halloween, Disguise Costumes has announced that they're going to be offering new costume options for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Of course, they're going to have a Ghostbusters costume quality parka, an engineering uniform costume, 3 different Slimer options for people of different ages and sizes, updated Ghostbusters uniforms featuring inflatable proton packs with the new yellow bumper on them, and of course, Garaka. And I gotta say, of these costumes that I've seen, my favorite is the Garaka costume because it's like a full body mascot costume with a robe that drops all the way to the floor and mimics the way that Garaka like lands in the middle of the firehouse, and then the bottom of his body just kind of spreads out into the ice below him. And so very cool costume, really cool idea in terms of how they did it. Pricing and availability are not available on these yet, but pictures are. You can go find them over at Ghostbusters News for sure, where Jason's got good coverage of it. But you should expect a full slate of like Ghostbusters Frozen Empire Halloween costumes this season, and Disguise is ready to unveil them for everybody. I did hear from the LA Ghostbusters that apparently this was something announced at a panel at WonderCon by a designer for Disguise who came by their booth with 2 of her children wearing the costumes. And so they were very excited to meet the Ghostbusters, and the Ghostbusters were very excited to see the new costumes, which is kind of a fun idea. I wish I'd been there to see that. Moving past Halloween and into Christmas, Hallmark has announced that they have quite possibly the coolest Christmas tree ornament that they have ever created coming back. This is an ornament that's going to make a callback to the 1984 film and is called Roast Him. It essentially is a sculpted version of the climax of the original 1984 Ghostbusters movie, where the 4 Ghostbusters cross the streams and blast Stay Puft in the face, or rather in the chest with the cross streams and knock him off the building. This is awesome. Like, I have to say, like, I'm so excited about this. I'm a Hallmark collector who, we've seen a lot of Ecto 1 ornaments that are cool, but they often feel like they're rehashed. The Venkman ornament we got in 2019 was okay, but the likeness wasn't all that great. This thing looks awesome. It looks like the top of 55 Central Park West Spook Central. So I can't wait to put this on my tree. Apparently this is going to light up and play audio clips from the movie. And I mean, I hope they're audio clips from on top of the building. I hope it's not like, talking about the last of the petty cash, and instead is about being on the roof fighting Gozer. But it's expected to be available in July, which is kind of cool because that means it's going to come out as part of the ornament preview that they put out in July. And then they usually put out an additional set of ornaments that land for October that are then around for the rest of the year. So this also means it'll probably be around somewhere around San Diego Comic-Con, which is something that Hallmark tends to try to go to now with their I can't remember what it's called, but I think it's called Pop Minded. It's like a line of ornaments that are for pop culture collectors. They're usually limited, etc. So this won't be one of those. It's just going to be a standard keepsake ornament, but It's going to come out in July, probably around San Diego Comic-Con is my guess. In unofficial merch news, Friday is your last day to get pre-orders in with Phantasm Toys for Frozen Firehouses and Library Ladies. This is, you heard me talk about this last week, that Tony Taylor from Phantasm Toys gave out little Frozen Firehouses that had the premiere date sculpted on the side of them. He's now selling that firehouse without the premiere emblem on it, instead with a cool sculpted version of Garaka on the side of it. So these are nice. They're really awesome. They're like little statues as opposed to action figures that I think commemorate the movie really well. And if you are a person who didn't get to get one at the premiere, you have the opportunity to get one of those up until Friday. The other thing that they've got available over there at Phantasm is the Library Lady, which this is like the best version of the Library Lady they've ever made. It lights up. It has different translucent resin than the stuff they've used before. I have to say I'm envious of this thing because it like makes me go, okay, yeah, my Maddie Collector one is cool, but it doesn't light up. So you got to take a look at these. If you want to get your hands on them, you've got until Friday the 5th. And then after that, the pre-orders are going to close. In terms of other unlicensed merchandise, and particularly things that you can have signed, TCU Collectibles still has the pre-order available for Kurt Fuller that we talked about last week that closes on April 15th. He is, of course, Jack Hardemeyer in Ghostbusters 2. Remember, we talked about this last week that you can have any item signed by Kurt Fuller for $50. Any other requests like character names, personalizations, or quotes will cost you an additional $10. And if you want to have, if you don't want to send something in to have signed, if you want to have the folks at the containment unit, Matt and Tom, produce an 8x10 or an 11x14 or a collectible ray gun card, those are going to run you $5, $8, and $5 respectively. And then the new signing that they announced that is sort of like, was almost surprised to see it's going to happen because it's so cool. Harris Yulin, who you may not know by name, but you definitely do by character. He plays Judge Stephen Wexler, of course, the judge who says he sentenced the Scolari brothers to the chair, and who is, of course, asking the Ghostbusters to save him in his courtroom in Ghostbusters 2. Definitely not somebody who you see commonly signing. So this is a pretty cool opportunity to get this autograph done, especially for many people out there who've been looking to get it done for a long time and to get it added in their collection. If you want to have something signed by Harris Yulin, you can, of course, send things into the containment unit to get that, personalized or have your own item signed. Any item will cost $60 to have signed by Harris Yulin. If you're having 8x10s printed again, they're going to cost $5. 11x14s will cost $8. Ray gun cards will cost $5. And then, let's be real. Here's the coolest thing you can have Harris Yulin sign. You can have a judge's gavel for $25. Let's think about that for a second. Who doesn't want to spend $60 on a Harris Yulin autograph and have that put on a judge's gavel for $25? And then you can be just bang it whenever you need to, just to try and scare away ghosts who piss you off. But it's just a really cool opportunity, really neat stuff. If you have any interest in having these, getting these autographs or getting any of these things signed, reach out to the folks over the containment unit, TCU Collectibles, aka Matt Sanders and Tom Henry. The way to do that is via email at slimedsignatures@gmail.com. Don't direct message them on Facebook, etc. If you want to place an order, do Gmail them at slimedsignatures@gmail.com to set that order up. And Harris Yulin is going to close on April 26th. So if you want to get your order in for Kurt Fuller, you've got until April 15th. If you want to get your order in for Harris Yulin, you've got until April 26th, and then you will lose those opportunities. And a final cool thing that the folks over at TCU Collectibles are doing is with partnership with special effects legend Steve Johnson, who of course is the original sculptor of Slimer. He also worked on the Library Ghost. And so they have a really cool light up statue that is a Library Ghost bust. It stands about 6 inches tall and about 10.5 inches wide. These are each going to be hand signed. They were digitally sculpted using original archival reference material from Boss Films. And they're made of lightweight stone dyed translucent resin with a light up LED base with a USB connection. So these are really awesome. You can go and order those actually, as opposed to need to pre-order them over at tcutoys.bigcartel.com, where you can find any of the TCU Toys stuff. But you'll also find right now Steve Johnson's Library Ghost bust. That's going to set you back $250, but it is a really cool, unique, awesome piece. on a really nice light up bass. I mean, to be honest, like I say a lot of things that are library based are really cool. You've heard me talk about Tony Taylor's piece that lights up. You've heard me talk about my Mattel figure. This is not an action figure. This is an art piece. So it's something to go take a look at if you're interested in collecting busts and stuff, because this is something that comes directly, from the mind of Steve Johnson, the person who originally helped to sculpt that ghost. So that kind of wraps up stuff in terms of unlicensed merchandise for the week. So let me tell you about a couple fun things to go look for to round out your headlines. I've told you about the tested videos and the Instagram accounts that you should go check out for sure. And I've told you to check out Experience Explorers because, of course, Matt is our guest this week. But two things I want to encourage you to take a look at for a bit more fun this week. One, go over to Ghostbusters News and take a look at Jason Fitzsimmons' video demoing the Rebbit 3D 500-piece Firehouse puzzle that's available for Amazon for like $39. Because I have to say, this thing really impressed me, and Jason's video showing it off stunned me by how big it is. I never expected this thing was going to approach the size of the Lego Firehouse, but like it kind of does. And it's got a lot of really cool features on it that are really cute and fun. Lots of little Easter eggs and stuff on it that I never would have anticipated on a 3D puzzle. And Jason does a great job of showing it off. So go take a look at that because it's a fun little short 5-minute video that you can digest over lunch and go, wow, I never imagined anybody could build a 3D puzzle like this. And if you're looking for a new web series to check out that kind of focuses on the franchises of our community and the charitable work they do and the people in them, the Windy City Ghostbusters have a new series called Why We Bust that they are hosting over on their YouTube channel, their Facebook page, and their Twitch channel. That is a series that's going to profile a different member of the fandom each Thursday in a video hosted by Windy City member Kristen Smith. And that's published on, again, the Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube pages for Windy City Ghostbusters. You can check out the first 2 episodes now on the Windy City Ghostbusters YouTube page. And if you're interested in applying to be profiled, you can fill out a form at bit.ly/whywebust. The first letter in that is W is capitalized. So bit.ly/WHY all one word. And just the first letter of W is capitalized. And if you fill out that form, you might get selected to be featured in a future episode. So something to go check out if you want to find a way to promote your franchise or promote what you do or tell your story. There's a place to do that. That's new. Okay. So that about wraps up our headlines for this week. So let's go now to my conversation with Matt Daniels of Experience Explorers as we get into, chatting a bit about his relationship with Ghostbusters, the behind the scenes footage that he shot, his partnership with Ecto1NJ, and a whole bunch more. Joining me on Extraplasm Podcast, a new friend of the show, somebody who I'm excited to have on, who I've got to meet face to face for the first time at the Ghostbusters Frozen Empire premiere in New York City, Matt Daniels of the Experience Explorers YouTube channel. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
I'm excited to have you on. I'm totally stoked that we finally got to meet each other because I feel like we have tagged each other back and forth as a result of our mutual friendship with our good friends over at the Ecto1NJ, Nick and Greg, Nick of the Ecto1NJ, of course, and Greg, the Ectotech. And so it was sort of weird when we finally got to meet each other face to face outside the firehouse because I was like, oh, these, every time I talk about them and I hang out with them and you and I end up interacting. And it was kind of funny because I had literally just gotten out of their car.
Yeah, you had. Yeah. Yeah, I was at the firehouse. I thought this is an opportunity to do a bit of YouTube content. I actually just finished a live stream, and the car just turned up. There it was. I knew that he was giving you guys a tour, but I wasn't sure that was going to be the moment that you guys would all appear. And that was kind of like the beginning of the surge of people arriving at the firehouse. It was quite a moment.
Yeah, it was. But I was so stoked that I finally got to sort of put name to face and to see you and you sort of, talk a bit because we've interacted in Instagram messages and what have you over the last few months. You've been doing a lot of different behind the scenes content about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire during its production in New York City, especially with respect to the driving footage that was coming out and what have you. And so it was really cool to be able to kind of meet you face to face. But it's kind of funny you said this, that you didn't know when they were showing up because I didn't know when they were showing up. They were literally I don't think I've told this part of the story on the podcast, but we were walking around in New York City, me and Jason Fitzsimmons and JD Raymer. We had gone down to the Insomnia Cookies, or rather up. We had to go all the way like uptown to like the 50s or something from where we were down in like the 30s. And so we went uptown on the train to go chase the cookies. It was like, are you going up there to go to Dana Barrett's apartment? No, we're going to go buy like cookies that we can't get in our respective locations back home and get the cool sleeve that looks like a trap box so we can have that.
Yeah, so, I'm not worried about Dana's apartment. I just want cookies. Yeah.
Right. Like, and so as we're like on our way to go get the cookies, that's when Nick starts texting me and he's like, bro, we're on our way into the city. Where are you at? And I was like, well, we're on our way like up towards Rock Center. And I think we're going to go over to get this cookie stuff. And he's like, cool. I'll let you know once we're in the city. So we're just like wandering around for a while. Like, when is our Uber going to pick us up? Like, we don't really know. Right. And then all of a sudden he's just like, okay, we're in the city. Tell us where you are. So we're like, okay, we're at like 53rd and 6th. And he's like, cool. Could you walk over to 7th or something? We're like, yeah, sure. So like, we were just standing around like, when does our Uber get here? Like, when's it coming? And then it arrived. And then the next thing we knew, we were going down to the firehouse. So it was kind of like amusing because people were like, you should have told me you were headed down to the firehouse. Like, I didn't know I was going to the firehouse. Like, I knew I was getting a ride somewhere. It might have been the firehouse, but you know, who knows? So yeah, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's quite an Uber. I mean, that's a flex, having that as an Uber.
Yeah. I was going to say, as somebody who's been in that car a bunch, what's your favorite part about riding in the Ecto 1NJ?
It has to be the reactions of people on the street. That, I mean, aside from obviously the fact that you're in the Ecto, which is just amazing. And you know, we talked about this before, but I have a video the first time I drove it, and the funny thing is my wife always tells me your face is so red in that video because I'm just so excited and kind of full of, I just it's so funny to watch myself. I'm like, I am like a child right now. But I think the best part has to be the reactions, because New York's New York, right? Jim, you know this, you know, coming from New York, people are never that excited and happy to see you in New York. But when they see the Ecto, it's like everything transforms. The whole place just turns into this happy experience. And there's something about that car on the streets of New York. We drove the car in Chicago when we were at the Wonderverse opening, and that was super cool, and people were excited as well. But you drive that car in New York, it's a special thing. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, I have to say, riding around in the back of that car, the thing that I did not anticipate or expect was the love and outpouring, of sort of the New Yorkers who were totally impressed by what was happening around them. And I think you're right. Like, there is this sort of thing about being in New York where people, you don't expect them to be that warm. It's like everybody's in their own zone, their own thing. And even when you watch people walk down the street, like they catch the car in their peripheral, they're not paying attention to it. Like you're a New Yorker at this point. Like, sure, you grew up in another country, but like, you know, like you're a New Yorker, you're in New York enough to know this. Like, you're in the zone. Like, you sort of have tunnel vision out what you're doing, you know?
Yeah, that's how you survive on the street, is you don't look at anyone else. You're just on your own business.
Right. Like that way, when people walk up to you in the middle of Times Square or something and try and hand you beads, you don't even acknowledge that those beads exist.
Their album on the disc.
Yeah, whatever it is. You also don't, if you live in New York City, you also don't go to Times Square. It's like, why would I ever go there? But like, realistically.
No, that's true.
Like it's one of those funny things to consider, that being in the back of that car is like this unifying moment where you see the love of all New Yorkers, of all shapes and sizes, of like all camps, of all walks of life, suddenly just kind of stop, whether it's construction workers, whether it's cops, like whether it's, you know, people who like rap artists who are handing out free CDs that aren't really free.
It's like basically the effect of positively charged mood slime. That's what the car does to New York when it drives down the street.
Yeah. Like, you have this video you just put out recently that's called, I think, what was it called? We accidentally fooled people with a Ghostbusters trailer.
It was something like that. Whether it will stay that, it's always a fun thing with YouTube. You're like, what's the best title thumbnail combination? It's always a challenge. But yeah, I mean, we called it that partly because when we uploaded it, some of the comments were like, "Dang, I thought this was the actual trailer," because this was in that kind of desert dry period before we got anything Frozen Empire, probably 3 or 4 months before that. And so people were all talking about, is a trailer going to drop? Is a trailer going to drop? And Nick wanted to put out this promo for Ghost Tours to show what the experience would be like. So that was the intent of the work that we were doing. And so when it dropped, people thought it was the trailer. They were like, crap, this is it. And then they were like, oh no, it's not. And so some people were like impressed and happy, and some people were angry because they thought it was the real thing.
But I think it's funny
I take that as a huge compliment.
No, it's great, right? Like, I think it's funny that you now have like sort of this behind the scenes video of the filming of the Ghost Tours promo, right? Which is essentially like what this video is that you have out now. And in it, like, you have, you're in the car next to Nick. He's driving an SUV. You're in the back seat, like, filming. You're also hanging out the windows, which I totally appreciated as a person who was trying to film from inside the Ecto-1NJ a few weeks ago. Like, how do you even do that? Like, you can't. But like, you're filming the car from outside of it, from another vehicle. And one of the things that just tickled me about the entire thing is that Greg is driving the car, right? And he's repeatedly turning the lights on. He's in traffic. This is a big no-no, right? Like, you're not supposed to turn the lights on in traffic. Like, you're not supposed to do that. He's like sitting in traffic, flipping the lights on. Nick's driving the car behind him, and he's like, I guess the lights are coming on today because Greg's driving the car, right? Like, and it's just like, at the same time, that's been done so many times. When I was in the car, right? Like, they were on the loudhailer telling people, an MTA bus, like, MTA bus, please clear the lane, Ghostbusters. And it's Greg. He's just like essentially running traffic control. And of course, like, as we roll past cops who are watching us do this, they're like waving at us. So that moment in Frozen Empire where like the cops see the Ghostbusters go by and they're like, should we call it in? And they're like, nah, they got it. Right? Like,
that's 100% real. That's exactly what happens. It is crazy. I mean, sometimes there's the odd moment where you're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And then you see the cop car and the cops are just like, this is the best day ever. And like waving out the window at you. The very first time we did this, we heard the Ghostbusters music playing in the street. We were kind of heading up to Central Park. And this big van pulls beside. It's a big police van. And they were like, oh, it was us that were playing the music. So they had their loudhailer on. Here we are with the Ecto, and they're playing the Ghostbusters theme tune to basically convey us down the street. It's kind of like, let's run some red lights and have the cops support us. and that's what it's like. I mean, the fact that everybody has this unilateral kind of experience of joy from seeing the car is just a wonderful thing to experience. It's the happiest that you'll ever see New York City, I think.
It really is. And I love that you've captured a lot of that in the video that you've shot of the car. I mean, I think like we were talking about this a few minutes ago, that your experience coming into Ghostbusters is that, you kind of had this family YouTube vacation vlogging channel on, for a long time, right? Before you even moved to the US. Like, how long have you been in the US now?
Almost 6 years now, which is kind of crazy to even contemplate.
Like,
it was
you
meant to
picked
be
up
for
your
2.
entire family, right? Like, and moved. What brought you into the US?
My work. So my work transferred me here. That wasn't actually too tough a decision. Maybe those of us in New York or in the US don't have quite the same. There's this love in Europe for New York. It's because we see it in movies, we see it everywhere, and so. When they said, do you want to come and work in New York City? I was like, let me think about it. Yes. And it was just immediate. And so, so it's been that long. And you're right. Yeah, we had this channel. In fact, the very first video that we did was building a spaceship in our garage. Or our garage, as I should probably say for an American audience.
No, very quickly now, you have to fix all mispronunciations of vitamins, advertisements, like all of those. There's a filter I apply it to the whole podcast, and it just deletes them and changes this garage, vitamins. It's AI based.
The problem is I don't even know what's right or wrong anymore. I get into this state of confusion where I'm like, wait, which is the right way to say this? And sometimes my wife and I are like, wait, what was the right way to say this word? And our kids all, have the ability to use American accents now. So they're all, depending on which company they're in, when they're at home, they can push the British accent, but when they're with their friends, they're American.
Just make sure you continue to spell theater correctly. Like, it's R-E. I'm okay with that. And the Oxford comma is good. And also, it's totally fine to put U's in the word color if you'd like to. That's totally fine. But
the big one that I got, everyone was, I mean, when I was at the, I say premiere, right? Because we were at the premiere of the movie, and Nick and Greg were like, premiere. I can't even say it properly, but I can attempt
premiere.
it.
Yeah, at the premiere of the movie.
I can't say it properly. There's some things that I just can't say.
No, you just have to live in New York long enough, and then once you do, you'll learn how to turn that on and off. You can go, come on, let's go down to the street. We're gonna get a slice. It's gonna be awesome. We're getting a street pretzel. I'll get an Uber. We'll go over. We'll hang out with Greg and Nick. It'll be awesome. We'll go over to Jersey, and you can just turn it on and off like a switch. It's one of those things you learn to do.
I'm working on it. It's just weird with an English accent to say we're going to go and get a slice. It just doesn't sound quite the same.
This sounds like you sound like my GPS unit when you do that. You're like, could you say in 500 feet, turn left for a slice? Like that's
in 500 feet, you will find a slice on the corner of 16th and 5th. Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, getting back into this, you came here, several years ago. You were running this family vlogging channel, right? You were sort of talking about this, that your first video is like doing things like building a spaceship in the garage. Right?
Yes.
Like those, or the garage.
Or the garage, yeah.
for your carriage. And so
yes.
I think this is awesome. Like you kind of transitioned through this. You moved to New York, right? I'm not like trying to make an assessment of whether this is true for you or not. You can weigh in on it, but it seems like that
sure.
opened up opportunities for you in terms of doing like a family vacation channel. You had a segment or a series of videos like doing things on Back to the Future and going to the Broadway show and things like that. Like, so how do you end up being in a situation where like let's just be real, the logo for your channel now has a Moogly on it. Like you're so associated with Ghostbusters that like your branding has adopted Ghostbusters.
And that was more of a just we were meant to do like an 8-week takeover on the channel, which was all Ghostbusters content, and that 8 weeks has kind of expanded because there's so much content to still share, and so it probably won't stay as Ghostbusters forever. But I mean, there's always going to be now a huge dimension of Ghostbusters as a core fandom that's going to be on the channel. And yeah, I mean, I have interest in lots of other fandoms, as I know you do, right? We've talked about that.
Yes, we've talked off air about our mutual love of Doctor Who and Star Trek.
We have, yes. But so I've been doing various different videos on different things. I'm kind of not set on one thing, but I love Ghostbusters so much. I mean, it's one of my absolute favorite things. And when Afterlife was coming out, and we'd all had to wait a whole extra year for this film to come out, I was like, what would be a great video? A great video would be to dress up as Ghostbusters and go visit the filming locations for Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And then I had this thought. I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if we could do that in an Ecto? And so I thought there must be somebody with an Ecto. So I looked on Instagram and I found Ecto1NJ. And so I reached out to Nick, and that was literally, I mean, there's a whole video on my channel about this as well, but that was literally within, I guess, 2 months of Hurricane Ida coming through New Jersey. And we'd rented for a long time in the US, and then we just bought a house, and literally the day that we bought the house, it flooded from Ida. Like we had the keys and it flooded.
You're like, welcome to your insurance policy. Now you get to use it.
Welcome to the inclement weather of the United States. And so we just kind of got ourselves back together and sorted that all out. And I was like, all right, let's start making videos again. I reached out to Nick and realized that he'd had his car had been flooded in the same hurricane. And so we were, obviously it's slightly different. His car is one thing, my basement's another, but it was an instant kind of connection about, let's commiserate over our lives and everything being flooded out. And, but he was like, hey, if we can get the car back up and running. And that was about the time that he met Greg, actually. And let's see if we can get the car up and running and see if we can do this. He was up for it because, of course, this was always his plan, was to do this New York City tour in the car. Mm-hmm. So I had no idea about that. So weirdly, our family were kind of the first family to do the tour before it was
Right.
even a thing. And so we dressed up as Ghostbusters. As I said earlier, I got very red in the face and super excited, and you know, spent this day just hanging out with Nick, chatting with him about his experience of the car, his love of Ghostbusters, and touring these locations. And yeah, and so that was the kind of first diversion really the channel took into Ghostbusters. And it was at that point really that kind of Nick and I started talking about, well, what are the other things we could do? Maybe we could create this promo, and the rest is history. And so, you know, the video we were just talking about, that's the, you know, not the promo, but it's the behind the scenes of the promo, you know, how we made it. And I think it is a fun video. I tried to convey the fun that we had doing it. I still have some of the bumps and bruises, I think, from being thrown around in the back of the truck. There's another thing I didn't put in, actually, because, you know, for these videos, you try and keep it focused like we did 2 days, but it was literally 2 days for what we shot. But there was a time kind of some months before where we tried to do some other stuff and that Nick had used for a kind of earlier promo. And I was literally sat in the back of a flatbed truck, you know, with the camera. So there's this video of me, I'm talking to camera, you can't hear anything because the wind is so loud. And I'm literally just sat in the back of a truck with this big Ghostbusters sign and filming the Ecto. You know, it's super guerrilla style filming. I don't claim any like super expensive kit or anything for these shots that we did. That's not entirely true. We did use some decent cameras as well, but a lot of the shots that we got of the car on the road were just shot on a good iPhone and a GoPro.
Right. And that's amazing how you can do that at this point. Like, you know, I mean, even being at the premiere, you know, the number of people who were there who were covering the premiere, either because they were going to be on the fan cart, you know, in the fan pen, or they had media access who were just shooting everything on phones and then uploading to different channels. I mean, it's pretty wild, but like between that and if you are doing, say, interviews and you have like a Rode mic or something, there's so much you can do just with those devices at this point and get done.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What you're reminding me of is that during the time when I was in the back of the car, you know, we were trying to figure out how to shoot some footage that conveyed that we were inside the Ecto 1 to post on social media. And I have like no skill with this. I was like, what am I going to get? I'd also had a phone that was literally 48 hours old. It was like, if I drop this thing, if anything happens, like I don't have another phone to use to film everything I need to film for the premiere. And this thing is like brand new. It's not, they have the insurance policy on it yet. And in contrast to that, you know, shout out to friend of the show, JD Raymer, who like used to film news, you know, and edits a television show now and has done freelance camera work. And he was like leaning out the windows of this 1959, you know, Cadillac, just like arm out the window with his phone, like hanging onto it by the grips of his fingertips, just like slightly holding on. I'm like, you're a brave man, sir. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild what you're able to shoot that way. And I think it's pretty cool that you were able to put that together so well. And I love this idea that like, it's kind of weird to consider, but like, as much as the hurricane sucked, like the hurricane in a weird way, like kind of brought you all together. Like it kind of in a very strange, you know, between Nick and Greg, like I've talked about that when they were on this show the first time when they were on like in June of 2023, they came on and we talked about this a bit that like, you know, like without the hurricane, their story would have been vastly different. But even for you, it's like you're moving to the US, having your first experience with something like a coastal flooding, you know, hurricane storm that you would have never faced. Like, let's be real, like tropical weather doesn't really make it, you know, to like London. It's not a thing.
No,
but
it does not.
You know, like it's sort of funny that like the hurricane and Ghostbusters are like the two things that kind of like brought you into a community of people in a completely different country, you know, like it's kind of cool though.
It is cool. I'm super thankful for it. We were having a chat as well about kind of the fandom before we got to the podcast, and I've just really, it's been wonderful how I felt very welcomed, as I suppose as a bit of an outsider I would call myself, and you know, as a Brit in America, it's just been awesome. So much fun. I had so much fun with everything that we did at the premiere, the stuff that we've done before with, you know, hanging out with Nick and Greg. I'm just, I feel super grateful. And I love it. I mean, just the fact that I've been able to walk the streets of New York with a proton pack on my back and, and driving an Ecto. You know, it's the kind of thing of dreams. If you're a fan, the idea that you might one day find yourself properly attired, I'll call it, at the firehouse with the car is an incredible thing to consider. And I said
it's
it,
wild.
Yeah, and in the first video, I said, my child self would just have lost their crap, really,
right?
over this idea. And then even when I was filming at the firehouse, I had to pinch myself one point. I'm like, I'm filming the Ecto at the firehouse in New York City. I'm making a film.
Yeah,
and I still feel like I have to pinch myself now. I mean, here we are talking on Extraplasm podcast, which is super awesome. So yeah, I feel super happy to be here and chatting with you about our mutual love of just one of the many fandoms we enjoy.
Yeah, but I mean, the one I love enough to make a podcast every week. I don't have a Doctor Who podcast, like I wouldn't even try to make a Star Trek podcast because I listen to 4 of them. So I'd be like, that's a lot of competition. But I mean, it's
there's a lot of knowledge out there. That's a lot to know. You know, with Ghostbusters, there's a slightly smaller pool of knowledge for you to have to. But I feel like people that are really into Trek, I can't compete with them on the knowledge point of view. But I still love it.
There's like how many different TV series and how many different seasons of each versus.
Right.
Hey, what is it? 5 movies now. Some people will argue with you about whether or not it's 4. And 2 cartoon series, and if you're really deep you get into some comic books, but I don't know, I think it's funny that you said this, that like people are welcoming in the Ghostbusters fandom, that like as somebody who didn't necessarily come into the fandom as like someone who had been building a proton pack for 10 years and going off and like parading around in suits, like you found the Ghostbusters community to be one that you could step into and find people easily who were cool, who are welcoming. And that's the thing I find, that like there are definitely gatekeeping people out there in the community because there aren't any fandom, but like Ghostbusters has this weird like universal appeal that like when you tell people you like it, you immediately are always in a room full of 4 other people who are like, oh, I like that too. It's like ice cream. Like there's like one guy in every room who's like, fuck ice cream. But like everybody else is like, ice cream's cool. I like different flavors of it. Maybe not the same flavor as you. But like to me, Ghostbusters almost has like that same sort of like, I don't know, weird pop culture appeal, because even if you're not the most hardcore fan, you don't remember every cartoon episode, etc., it's something that everyone has some sort of positive relationship with. And that's exemplified by watching that car roll through New York City, right? It's like everywhere the car goes, like there's nobody who goes, oh, look at that stupid car. Like,
no. And if you take a step back from your fandom for a minute and you don't know what the car is, you could easily say that's a stupid car. Right. But Nick says, and maybe he said this on the podcast, he said that even if you don't know what it is, it's something to look at. And it certainly is that when they designed that car, when they came up with what it was going to look like, it just looks cool, whether you understand it or not. But the other thing I was going to say on the welcomingness of the fandom, I think the kind of the level to entry is quite low, right? You can get yourself a flight suit.
Yeah.
You can get yourself a name badge. You don't even need a pack. And, that you can start there. And a jumpsuit is not a complex thing to put on or to wear. Well, I say that. I put one on in the back of a car when we were doing the New York Post piece that I got. It's a funny story. Maybe I should tell it really quickly, but
yeah, that's
Nick
cool.
was doing this. The New York Post were doing this they were touring with him. They ran a piece on Ecto 1NJ.
This is like last week, right? There was a video piece and there was an article about it. And I will tag up to what you're saying here real quick to say, I told my parents that I rode in the Ecto 1NJ when I was at the premiere. I was very excited about it. I had a very childlike glee about being in the car and rolling up to the firehouse and being like, look at what's happening right now. I told my parents about this. My parents no longer live in New York. They moved up to New England in their retirement. But they are avid readers of the New York Post to such an extent that often we argue about what is inside of it. And
easily done.
I told them I was in the car. And the next thing I know, like about a week later, I get a series of text messages from my mother and my father separately that say, do you know this guy? Followed by links to the New York Post article and the video that you are very much talking about. And I went, yeah,
Right.
I was in that car. And they're like, oh, you were? And I was like, I guess it was in the New York Post, so it must be true now, Mom and Dad. Right? Like,
they actually
continue.
they did
Sorry.
they did a great write-up and a great video as well. But yeah, I'd said to Nick, I'd said this to him before actually during Ghost Tours, because I thought this would be a fun thing. So I said, what about halfway through the tour, a Ghostbuster runs out of a building with a smoking trap and just gets in the car with the people that are in the tour, right? 'Cause it's like a thing. And Nick was like, sure, let's do it. So like, I parked my car on Fifth, which is not far from where I actually, funnily enough, the exact place in the middle of the kind of the sewer dragon chase on Fifth Avenue is three blocks from my office. So I get the thrill of every time I go to work seeing, where
There's
where
the
they filmed
H&M
that.
they drive past.
Exactly, the H&M, and then there's the. This is the sad thing, right? Every time I watch the movie, I point and I go, "Hey, kids," because I was there with Max and Celeste, my two youngest kids, and we were literally stood there while they were shooting this. We were just out of shot, but we were there just as it goes past the pizza place and the MasterCard flag. The fact that I know these minute details tells you a lot about how much.
That's okay. When they picked me up and drove me down Fifth Avenue, I looked at the other folks in the car and was like, we're gonna drive past the H&M from the trailer. And they were like, what? And I was like, it's the new landmark, the H&M.
There you go, the H&M. Forget Dana Barrett's apartment or the firehouse. We just need to get to the H&M on Fifth Avenue. But anyway, so I was talking about the ease of jumpsuit as the access of entry, but I was the kind of point I was making was trying to get into a jumpsuit in the back of a car. That's much harder, which I was doing because I parked my car up and I'm like, okay, I've got my proton pack in the back. I actually had a trap that smokes that I made that I'll probably put a video out on how awesome. I did that. And stood out on the street and I was waiting for Nick to kind of give me the signal when he started getting towards Flatiron. And there I was, stood on the side of the street, and he said to the guys in the car, he's like, "Oh, there's a Ghostbuster up here." He's like, "Sorry guys, I have to stop. It's the Ecto. If there's a Ghostbuster out there doing their thing, I have to pick them up." And the guys in the car were like, "What? What is happening? Is this some random weirdo that he's just going to pick up?" And I mean, depending on your point of view, I am a kind of random weirdo. But Nick says, "Oh, I got to stop." And so he stops. He rolls down the window. We chat about what I caught, like class 5, and that I almost got my arm bit off. And then I open the back, throw my trap in, throw my pack in, and just get in with the videographer. And these two guys are like, "What is happening right now? Is this? Do you know this guy?" And of course, we very quickly let them in on our little trick. But it was a kind of fun stunt to pull with them. And
that's like half the fun of being in the back of the car with them is the amount of just random stuff.
Yeah,
they are like at one point we pulled up next to a guy who was driving his bike for DoorDash. And
right.
Nick just has the window down and he goes, "Yo, bro, what do you got in there right now? I'll take whatever you got. I'll give you double the amount of money. I've been driving around trying to catch class 5s all day, sucking down these carbon monoxide fumes. I whatever's in there, I'll take it. Just give it to me." Like, and the guy's looking at him like, "What?" Like,
it's strange that it gives you this kind of sense of permission to get away with things that you wouldn't normally do. I mean, even weirdly, even me dressed as a Ghostbuster on the street, I was literally on the corner of, I think it was 21st, and this guy pulls up. I don't think he was necessarily fully familiar with Ghostbusters, and he's like, "Hey, what's that kid on your back? What are you doing?" Because I've got this smoking trap. There's smoke pouring out of this thing, and I've got like the proton pack, and the lights are going, and he's like, "What is that kit for?" And I said, "Catching ghosts." And he's like, and there's just this moment of like, okay. He was just like, fair enough. But it was just, yeah.
My favorite, you're in cosplay question to be asked is when somebody looks at you and goes, "Who are you going to call?" And my favorite thing to look back and is go, "Us." Like,
yeah.
I mean, you're going to call somebody else? Why are you asking me this question? I mean, it seems like you should
Ghostbusters.
know. Like, us, presumably. If you're calling somebody else is a problem. They're probably not going to be able to help you out very much, but you can call somebody else. Like, Roto-Rooter exists, but they probably can't handle your issue.
Yeah, indeed, totally. They're not going to be able to do that. The other funny thing about that story was when I got in the back of the car, the guy on video was British. And we got talking, and he'd literally lived in the same town as me. We were like, what is going on?
That's so funny.
Yeah, of all the things that could happen. So this random Ghostbuster turns up, and he just happens to be from where you came from. It was funny. They were great guys as well, the guys from the Post. They were a lot of fun to hang out with.
That's awesome. I had decided that, after being at the premiere and then watching the movie, that you are just the Lars Pinfield of the Ecto-1NJ circle. That's what your role is now. Like, you are off in the video lab. You're the para-videographer and
there we go.
Para marketing person. Like, that's your job, right? But it's kind of funny. Like,
para-videographer, I like that.
Right? Like, I've been thinking a lot about this. How many different para jobs can the Ghostbusters create in the world where they have this research lab? Like, they have a para-botanist, they have a para-musicologist, a para-videographer makes sense. Like, somebody's got to shoot the weddings of the undead and also help to market, content.
And hey, they do have a video camera in the first movie when they meet the library ghost, right? So that, and we know that now, that we have a possessed Spin Doctors CD. So there could be, possessed VHS tapes, possessed anything,
Right.
I think that would be interesting.
I think that Ectotech's going to be a paramechanic in the research lab. Like, it's his job to fix all haunted cars, right? That's kind of the deal. Like, really, this is a fully extensible universe. And so
this is the expanded universe happening right now. This is what the cartoon's going to be about.
Right. And you're a part of that because you're part of making Ghostbusters International. Like, that's the whole shtick.
That's
you
it.
Came from the UK so that you could have these interactions, so you could be you could all encounter a haunted hurricane, because we've never talked about that part, but obviously the hurricane was haunted. That's why it affected the car. That's why it attacked the car. It was like trying to bring the death chill, but by hurricane form it took on a tropical tornado form or hurricane.
That's it.
That's terrible. That's a terrible plot line.
It was a good attempt. I like it. I like it. I'll go with it. I was there, so I already have a connection to that storyline.
Yeah. All right, fine. Then we're going to go with it. But that's what the next movie is going to be about. The next movie is actually about the Ecto-1NJ. They're working on it now, and you're starring in it. That's what we're telling everybody now. Yeah.
Yeah, I just need to learn how to say premiere. I can't say it. I can't do it. Premiere. I'm just going to stick with premiere.
Just say premiere. You have to say it like
premiere.
I'm going to the premiere, bro. That's the deal.
I'll go to the premiere. If it was that accent, it'd be like, I'm going to the premiere, mate, aren't I? That's where I'm going. That's more the Penfield accent. It's like, what I need is silence. To hear the ghosts.
Helps me understand the ghosts.
Silence for the ghosts. Yeah.
Oh God. That movie has given me so many new lines that I'm in love with. My favorite of which is that somebody asked me recently, have you monetized your podcasts? And I said, no, we're all being paid with the memories. Like, done.
I'm just hoping that there's no mallet in this podcast that I'm going to get hit with.
No.
To get more views. That's the one thing I'm hoping
that won't be a thing
feature.
that happens. I don't hit anybody with a hammer. But speaking of things that get views, one of the things that you shot that I was totally impressed by and couldn't watch for a while. I was afraid to watch it because I didn't want to see anything in it. But you had a lot of this footage that you captured of the Ecto-1, as you were sort of talking about being out on the road when they were shooting that second unit, shooting the Ecto-1 running down Fifth Avenue. How did that happen? How did you end up in the position to be able to capture all that?
Well, partly being in the right place at the right time. I think the news got out pretty quickly. Nick is good friends with folks at the Firehouse, and obviously the Firehouse knew that they were going to be shooting and filming some stuff there. And that's all kind of featured in the video. I've got two videos, actually, one that kind of breaks that down in more detail. And then the other one, which is kind of the 3 days that we were down there. So we went down and kind of hung out on the first day, and I met some new friends. Martin, who's part of New York Ghostbusters, he was super helpful in giving me information. He'd been following the shoot for the whole time, and so really I just started getting information about what was going on, and then I made every effort to be around and be there and try and participate. So first day was at the firehouse. We got to see that, and actually I think really they only shot one key shot with the car, which is funny because somebody put a comment on the video and said, "Oh, we were there at the firehouse and we saw the car go down Moore Street, but we couldn't figure out which shot in the movie that was." And I was like, I'm an expert now on Ghostbusters, so I was able to write back and say, "Oh, Moore Street, that's the final shot in the movie. That's when Trevor drives the car out and down the street." And they were like, "Oh, thank you so much. This is amazing." And I feel like I've moved to providing a service about these kind of insider details, which is funny because I only have a very tiny sliver of them, which is the stuff from the shoot. But yeah, so we did we did the stuff at the firehouse. The other thing they were doing there that was kind of intriguing at the time, and we were able to unpick later, was they were doing a lot of still photography, which, as we know, the majority of the movie was shot in the UK, on sound stages, and they built this glorious replica. I'm sure we've all seen Adam Savage's video by now of the tour of the firehouse, which is just stunning. But the only little tease we had of that was McKenna's TikTok video of her doing that lip sync video. Right. But I kind of pieced those two things together and I'm like, well, all this still photography is obviously they're getting high quality shots so they can recreate New York because they have all this green screen. So they spent a lot of time taking reference material. They were shooting stuff from the sky for those above shots that we see in the movie. And then I think they caught, there's one shot we see of the firehouse with a bike kind of riding past it that I think they probably would have been able to do then. If not, they probably could have done it in the UK. And then it's just that Moore Street shot really that they were doing at the firehouse. But really most of it was getting the surrounding environment.
It is kind of funny that the first thing that you saw in that 3 days of like kind of shooting or following them around, sort of as they were doing shooting, is the final scene of the movie. But you don't know it at the time, right? Like you're like, they must be leaving the firehouse. They go on a bus. And it's like, well, they are, but they're leaving the firehouse because it's the end of the movie. And it's also kind of funny to consider that like in that compositing, like you're watching a car pull out of a firehouse and the firehouse is the firehouse as it exists, as opposed to the firehouse that was just frozen and smashed to pieces and then melted back out, Yeah.
And that, and it's interesting. That's a super clever shot too, because I can admit to this is I've watched it for the fourth time this weekend just gone, and I paid more attention to that Moore Street shot because of that comment on my YouTube video. Because you say something and then there's this thing in my mind that goes, am I right? I'm sure I'm right. I'm going to really watch that hard now and make sure that I was right. And I was right. But what's crazy is the car starts on the UK set because there's the huge crowd there. And I'm sure, like me, you follow a bunch of the UK Ghostbusters social media accounts. And there's a couple of the guys I met at the premiere. They were able to be part of the crowd, which is super awesome that they got to do that. And so I'd seen those shots.
A couple of those guys, I don't know if you've seen this, they had T-shirts made up that say...
Oh, really?
They had T-shirts made up that say, Canon. And then like the O in Canon is the Ghostbusters logo.
I have seen that.
They're like, we are Canon. We're in the movie. And that's hilarious.
Hey, I'd be well up for that. If I'd been in the movie, I'd be getting myself one of those shirts immediately. That's fantastic.
But you are right. That finale shot begins on the soundstage in the UK.
And then perfectly and seamlessly transitions to the car on Moore Street, which is crazy to me.
It is crazy.
I really want to know whether they did some incredibly clever blend, which to me, being a bit of a fan of Corridor Crew, I don't know if you ever watched Corridor Digital or Corridor Crew visual effects artists react. I really want them to react to that shot because there's a part of me that thinks that maybe they took an empty plate and that the car is completely CG because I just don't know how they were able to make that transition so smoothly. But yeah, I mean, it's a really cool shot because it starts in the UK and ends in New York.
I don't know who's been sharing it because I know I've seen it a few times, but there is a video that's been like being pushed around social media that essentially shows the layer by layer digital compositing of that. And so it shows like the car pull, like it shows the green screen and it shows like the people walking past the firehouse in the green screen and the car pulling out. And then it kind of like wipes across and New York is added to it. And then it pulls it away again. If I can find it, I'll send it to you later. But somebody out there listening, for folks out there listening, I'm sure there's folks who have seen this video circulating on Facebook, because I think that's where I keep seeing it pop up. And it's like some sort of, it's got to come out from the production. It has to be something that like, Sony released to be like, hey, look at what we were able to do with our cool tech. But I've often wondered too, like, how much is the technology that they have been teasing, off at, like, I think it was CES that they were at recently, where they had the VR technology. Stuff? Yeah, the real-time stuff that, like, what have they been using that we don't necessarily know about? Like, was there some of that stuff sort of dabbled in to say, hey, how can we recreate New York in these other contexts? Because I mean, it's interesting to consider. Like, I haven't gone through and done a shot by shot and like pay attention, but I was sort of focused when I was there at the firehouse, like looking around and going, what is around you? Like, what is actually here versus what isn't? And it's kind of interesting to me because, like, across the street from the firehouse is not a set of, walls illustrating a construction site with things nailed to it. It is definitely a building, and there's definitely glass windows. And so it's kind of like kind of interesting to think about what was composited in, like how much of it is authentically the street around the firehouse versus something that stood in well,
and here's my view on that again, because I looked at that a lot, because again, you can see it's easy to see in McKenna's behind the scenes video that she did, harder to see in the final shot of the movie because there's such a big crowd. But those pieces of graphic art that we see, the ones that I feature in my video that were on the New York street with this Vice Apex band, and that they are there again, on those construction walls. And my point of view on that, and this is where we get ultra geeky, and this is me, right? I love figuring out the behind the scenes.
This is what we do here. It totally makes sense.
I love that. Yeah. But that whole building, the whole corner of that building in real life is glass, right? Right. And so rendering glass and then all the reflections and all those kind of things are going to be a nightmare. So my assumption is that was a very sensible, simple thing to do to make that whole process easier for them, because constructing something that has to be transparent and see-through and make it realistic, and then you're going to get camera reflection. They could have built that in the studio, but all the reflections would have been in there of the camera. It would have just made them a very big visual effects job.
Oh, yeah. I mean, by the same token, I don't know this for sure, and this is complete speculation, so before anybody gets mad at me, this is why I'm saying it. But I think that it's interesting that in the movie that we have seen, we didn't see any of the lights on any of the red jackets.
Yes,
like not
indeed.
one. And in the trailers, like we saw the red lights were supposed to go, or like probably the white lights were supposed to go around in a square or whatever on people's chests.
Right.
And none of that was moving. And when I've talked to folks, people were like, why do you think they didn't have them on? And I went, well, if you were going to be doing reshoots and you were on a timeline and you had to redo some scenes, and now you have this issue of every single one of your principal actors is wearing a moving light on their chest. That creates such a nightmare in one, continuity, and two, in compositing, because you have a light source that is constantly changing from frame to frame to frame that is attached to every single character. As like, so if it makes sense to me that if you had to go back and find a reason to, I don't know why reshoots happen. I don't know any of those things, but like from my perspective, if you had to then turn around and reshoot some stuff, you might just decide to turn those off. Like that for the sake of making your job easier and for the sake of meeting deadlines, you might just go, hey, this is not worth the time, pain, and energy involved in having moving lights on every one of our principal actors in the biggest scenes of the movie. Like,
I get it. Yeah, I'm with you. And the continuity being the worst, because if that light is kind of rotating around, you can cut back and forth and you're going to get all sorts of continuity. I mean, it's going to be like the worst possible continuity errors you get when people are eating food and, half their cheesecake is there in one shot and then it's all gone in the next, or, it's that kind of a nightmare from an editing point of view. And or
it could kind of be like podcast's name tag in this movie. just throwing that out there for anybody who's watched the movie this week. Just kind of pay some careful attention to what happens to podcast's name tag in the final scenes of this movie, because he becomes a real Ghostbuster.
And we don't mean the cartoon, by the way, just to clarify. He doesn't suddenly become an animated character, just to clarify. But yeah.
But on the his
status is elevated.
It is. He suddenly becomes official. I thought it was kind of like, for those of you out there who are like, what are you talking about? I think it was Ivan Ronald Shablotsky who messaged me and told me this. So shout out to you if it was, and if it wasn't, just give yourself up in the pat of the back for something else. And then whoever actually sent it, give yourself one too. And I'm sorry, but somebody messaged me and said, before you go to the movie next time, make sure that you watch your podcast's name tag. And sure enough, he is wearing the same outfit that he had in Somerville for most of the movie, where he is drawn on his podcast, markered on by hand, drawn on, painted on name tag. But somewhere in the final battle, when he shows up with that mallet and hits the proton pack, he's wearing a scarf over his neck that blocks his name badge, so you can't really see it. And when he raises his arms to bring the mallet down onto the proton pack, you can clearly see a podcast name tag that is sewed on where the old one used to be. And then in the final scenes, when he gets kissed by a woman on the street, he's definitely wearing an embroidered name tag. So, there are already issues within reshoots, and that's not to be like, this movie, it's bad. Like, I love this movie, it's so great. But I look at that and go, that's an easy to miss thing continuity-wise between wrapping a film or wrapping your shooting in one country, going through a director's strike and an actor's strike, not being able to do anything with anybody for many, 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 many months, and then needing to re-engage the project. At that point, you're going to deal with things like blinky lights are a thing you can just turn off.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I have to say as well on that topic, I loved the fact that when Podcast gets suited up, that he has got that drawn on badge. I love it. And that his belt is just a piece of string with all the things hanging off it. I thought it was great. The other thing on that too is that it's very possible. I mean, so much conversation has been going on about what was changed, what was cut out. And, Gil has said himself that stuff was changed or cut out in order to enable the flow that he wanted to have for the film. So who knows, maybe Podcast was presented with his own jumpsuit, maybe. In a previous cut, maybe that was even in a scene that wasn't even shot, because all these props and builds, they all happen based on the script,
right?
And on the concept art, they don't happen based on what even gets filmed. Sometimes things don't even get shot because they get cut out as part of that. I think I love the way Gil described it. I think he talked about the kind of the fire. Did he talk about the fire of the movie making process?
Yeah, the movie is forged in the fire of the way it's made, right? That he's open. He wants people to see those deleted scenes, but that he doesn't want to recut the movie to an extended cut, because the film as it exists is forged in the fires of the production process, right? And so to make an extended cut means to essentially relight the fire and redo it. Like, you can't kind of capture the same thing,
And that's a dangerous place to go.
It's like rewarming pizza. It's never as good as it was the first time.
No, it's not. And it's hard, isn't it? I mean, we haven't talked about this at all on the podcast, but like in a previous life before I did the job I do now, and I ran a film production company, and I directed and cut a couple of independent movies, and I can totally relate to that point. And also the point about not wanting to come back and try and recut something, because nothing's ever finished. The way I describe it is you just always abandon something, like because of time, because of money, because of a lack of interest, whichever thing it is, there's always a pressure on you to get this thing done. And I mean, I didn't have the external pressure that I'm sure Gil had from Sony and Ghost Corps, and by the way, I'm not trying to imply that was a negative pressure. It's just a real pressure but
just the practical reality of like, it's a business,
Exactly. And so, I always was the producer on everything that I did, which was weirdly harder, actually. I don't, like, when I think about Eric Reich producing, I was the toughest job I ever did in that industry. So I much prefer directing to producing. So I've got so much respect for that. But yeah, there is a real, if you go back to things, you'll never stop, because nothing is ever going to be perfect or right, or, and you change, right? If you make a movie and it takes 2 years to make that film, by the end of those 2 years, you know, as a human, you're a different person because you've been through different experiences. And so things
Right.
resonate with you differently. And so you're always going to want to tinker because now it doesn't necessarily reflect how you felt when you wrote it or your worldview when you wrote it or any of those things. So you're never ever going to see things in quite the same way. And it's super easy to look back at something and go, oh, I really hate that choice I made, or I really don't like that. But once you get out of that period, that 18-month period, you have to stop because otherwise you're just never going to be done. Ever.
George
You're
Lucas. You'll make
exactly
many
what I was gonna
versions of the
say.
same movie.
you end up with the bad CGI Jabba the Hutt. That's what happens if you tinker too much.
And the only way to get out of it is to eventually just sell it.
Yeah, sell it to Disney.
Like, how do I stop remaking Star Wars? I know. I'll sell it to somebody else and then they'll want to remake it.
Somebody take this away from me before I do anything else with it. Yeah. I get it. I get it. But yeah, so I mean, it'll be exciting to see those deleted scenes. And we were talking before the podcast, right, about Popular Tripe's video where he put together the kind of deleted scenes, the things that we saw in the trailer that didn't appear in the movie.
Yes.
And that's the other thing. I know that has created some angst amongst some. And I do get it. I get it. But it didn't bother me in the same way that it's bothered others. I mean, maybe that's partly because having been through that process, I know how that can be. I mean, I know I got criticism. I made a movie and then there's a chase sequence in the movie that happens on foot that we used 3 different towns in. And we showed the movie in the town, the main town where it was set. And you turn a corner and you're like 20 miles away from another town. And then you turn another corner. And people got like, oh, you didn't stick to continuity. I'm like, well, you know, I'm not trying to make a documentary about this town. I'm trying to make an exciting chase. And so I have to, like, when they turn that corner, it's a really boring bus stop. That's not what I wanted. I want to turn the corner and have a loading dock or have like a garage or a workshop where people are taking cars apart.
I definitely want to come back and talk to you about this idea of like what else you were shooting around New York, when they were filming in a minute. But you've touched on something that has like I've wanted to unpack with somebody. So now I'm like, will you help me? Because we can talk about this for a minute. As somebody who has made films and who has like worked in, different marketing and whatnot and been a YouTube content creator. I think there's a thing about this I've said in the last few episodes that I feel like people to some extent went into the movie who were hardcore fans and were looking for references. Like they were looking for things they saw in a commercial. And then they knew like there was a finite amount of time where the screen was going to go black after an hour and 45 minutes. So they were sitting there going like, where are my Easter eggs? And in a weird way, like they were almost trained to do that because like that was what we were told to do with Afterlife. It was like going into it, we had all that time. We had an hour or rather an hour. We had a year of like waiting. And in it, like it was like
a year of 3 photos. That was it.
Right. But at the same time, we had Jason Reitman saying like, you're going to love this. It's a love letter to the fans. I want you to find the Easter eggs. And so it was like we were told to look for things and then given clues about them. And then as the trailers came out, people were like, oh my God, it's the orange thing from the lab. Oh my God, it's a slime blower. Like, so it was like, look for these different things as you're watching the trailers. And so you're like then walking into the movie looking for the things, almost like a kid looking for the hidden stuff in a highlights magazine. Right. And like, I weirdly feel like that's part of the reason why on a first viewing people would watch the movie and go like, it's not what I expected, but then they watch it a second time and like, I really enjoy the story. And I keep having that like repeated interaction with people. And I wonder to some extent to what level the marketing department is to blame for that rather than the director. And that's not, and I don't mean blame like they're the goddamn marketing department.
No, I get you.
But I just mean like there's this discussion from the last movie. I don't know if you know this, that if you look at the marketing for the last movie, the stream of stuff that comes out of the pit is green. It's not in the movie. It's orange in the movie. But like when the burst of energy comes out of the pit, it was green. And I can't remember where he talked about it, but at one point Jason Reitman addressed this and said like, that was a battle that I had with the marketing department and it was one that I lost. Like, I was like,
Right.
nothing is really green like that in our universe. That isn't consistent with the way that energy works and whatnot in our universe. Does that make sense? Like, but
Yeah.
it tested better with audiences, so that's what they did. And I wonder
Right.
if that's
Yeah.
what happened with these trailers that we saw, you know, or these TV spots that we saw, is that the marketing department has all this varied footage from the from the various days they shot, and they go, well, this particular joke works really well here, and it's maybe doesn't ever make it in the movie, you know?
Yeah, this is I'm very happy to get into this with you. I think that relationship between the actual artistic created product and the process to get people to watch it is very similar to the process of getting somebody to click on a YouTube thumbnail, right?
Yes.
It's the battle that I have, you know, as a person that's trying to grow their YouTube channel, which is people. I'm very grateful that people give me this feedback that they enjoy my editing style and the way I do stuff. But nobody's going to watch that video unless I can create the right kind of appropriate clickbait for somebody to click on it. And by the way, I'm not an advocate of clickbait as in let's put some salacious thing and then it's not what it is.
No, I know what you
is,
mean though. You mean like the framing of a thumbnail, right? And like what's in the thumbnail, whether or not it invites an audience member to click on it and see what's beyond it, right? It's like, it's weirdly why unboxing videos did so well for so long, because it was like, look, a guy holding a box, I wonder what's inside of it. Like,
totally. Yeah, you have to appeal to that emotional level, and there's a lot of different emotions that cause you to want to click. Unfortunately, we seem to live in a world now where most of the news is let's create some kind of enraged emotion in you through our headlines. So you'll read this article.
I think we should change it all, where it's just like every thumbnail says, which cute puppy is behind this thumbnail? Find out. Like,
yeah, exactly. But so yeah, it's that kind of thing, and I think filmmakers aren't marketers, and marketers aren't filmmakers, and they have two. That they ultimately swim in the same objective, which is, of course, a filmmaker. And Gil said this over and over again. And having watched the movie 4 times, I totally believe the point that he makes, which is this: he's a fan, right? This is a made for fans. That's 100% clear, 100% clear. And actually, I think, sorry to divert a little bit, but I think that he's also introduced a wider audience. I've seen younger kids in the theater loving this film, where I'm sure they would not, Afterlife wouldn't resonate with them in the same way. Yeah. And so I'm excited for that new generation of Ghostbusters fans. So, you know, Gil's making this for the fans, and the marketing team want to get the fans into the theater. But the fans are only a portion of that audience, right? How do you get the other people? Right. You know, you and I, we're diehard fans, right?
We're going.
We'd watch anything Ghostbusters. We're going to go.
We're going to go. We'll go. And if we don't like it, we'll be very vocal about it too. But like, I mean, and I won't, honestly, because I don't like people who get too vocal about that. But you get what I'm saying. It's like, as a fandom, like, yeah, we were all going. There was never a point where any of us were like, I don't know about that, you know?
No, and they looked after the fans. I should say this too. The other thing, I was kind of making a joke about it. The first time I paid to see Frozen Empire was this weekend. Because I went to the premiere. I watched it at the premiere for free. And then we had 2 preview screenings that Sony bought the tickets for fans, and that we, you know, and a live stream gave away to people. So I really felt kind of a duty to give Sony some money for watching this film. So I thought, I'm going to take, and my daughter was back from college. So I was like, right, we're going to go see this movie. And she loved it. But yeah, so back to this point about the marketing and the filmmaker, there is going to be a tension, because they're trying to create something that doesn't have 2 hours to play out in somebody's mental, you know, space. Right. They want sound bites. They want visual images. They want things that are going to grab people's attention. And I think the biggest difference between the Afterlife type trailer was that was much more of a tease, is my suggestion, right? Yeah. It was almost like there's so much more to see, and we're just showing you, you know, they even blurred out, right, Chomper. Chomper was blurred out in the trailer.
Or Muncher,
Muncher, yeah. And so you couldn't it was being very careful, kind of like the Star Wars trailers for the last few, they gave you so little of the plot or anything.
Going all the way back to Ghostbusters Fan Fest in 2019, when they showed us sort of like, this was a movie that was coming, they were going to be doing this. One of the things that Jason Reitman was standing on a stage talking about was how he wanted the movie to unwrap like a Christmas present. So he wanted it to be something that would come out, you would slowly open it and unwrap it, and you would finally get to see it on Christmas Day, but that would be something that you would take your time opening as opposed to something that was just one and done, and so like what you're talking about of like that slow tease of what's to come was planned way early on in that process, that he wanted it to kind of unfold that way. Yeah.
And that is not what happened with this movie. It felt like, my opinion is, it felt like the content, and again, you've talked about this on your podcast, right? Over the last couple of podcasts, there was plenty of stuff that wasn't in the trailers that was totally new for us when we went in to see it. But it did feel like several of the core plot points were very open in the trailers from the beginning. And so I think that, I remember at one point, and you said this about my video, right? And I had other people say they didn't watch my video because they didn't want anything to be spoiled. Right. And I get it, because there was so much stuff coming out. I stopped watching things. I think I didn't watch even, I'm a massive fan of Adam Savage. I'm a member on his YouTube channel. Yeah. But there was one of those videos I didn't watch because I just didn't want it spoiling before. And this was the premiere. We were going to the premiere, so we were seeing it a whole week before. No, agreed.
That was like my whole thing was like, I'm going to be able to go home, and while everybody else is like, oh man, it's another week till the movie comes out, I'm like, I get to go home and finally dig into the tested YouTube channel and just unpack that, and it is kind of weird to consider, but it's like, this is something that we can kind of swing back to talking about what you shot a bit, but like, was there anything that you shot that didn't make it to the movie?
That's a really interesting question. I think pretty much everything I saw did make it in, but not all in the same order. Gotcha. So again, I was very, very aware of what they'd shot, not only because I'd seen it on the street, but because I'd spent hours in an edit suite editing that, and then comparing it to the first full trailer that we had. It was a funny story. I was going to drop my video the week before the trailer came out, and somebody managed to get a message to me say, hey, the trailer's going to drop next weekend. And so I thought, you know what, I'm not going to drop this. I'm going to wait until they drop the trailer, and then I'm going to put this out a week after, because then I'll have material to do comparing and contrasting with, which I love doing anyway. So I'm interested in doing that. And B, there'll be a trailer, and then people will want something more. So I'm gonna put something out very strategically, and that worked. And it
probably, to be real, it probably also does a lot less to upset anybody about what might be revealed before they reveal it, right? And so
precisely, yeah,
it makes more sense to let the studio go, "Hey, this is our car driving through New York," and then you can go, "Hey, I got that too."
Totally, yeah. No, you're right, and I really wanted to make sure that I, stayed on the right side of Sony. I say that, I've had no complaints from Sony. With the stuff I saw being shot, there's several things they did. They obviously drove the Ecto through the street a lot. And we saw, the incredible stunt team as well, hanging out of the car and doing everything. But what I did notice in the movie is that you'll see a big portion of what they shot was to cover the fact that they were filming all the hero shots on a soundstage. So, when you see McKenna outside the car, when you see Paul, when you see Carrie, when you see Finn, they're all in a car on a soundstage. And there's a shot in a second kind of deeper dive video I did that came again from one of McKenna's TikTok videos that shows the car in a blue screen environment with pneumatic rams under the wheels. Right? The point of which is to create the movement of the car when they're in it. And so everything, they had to replace everything. And so you see, if you're really, really careful, you see the street repeat a few times. So and it's when the shot has obviously been pushed out of focus because you're focusing on McKenna. It's the piece where the great line of like, I can't hear you over the nuclear, whatever it is, generator. I can't remember the line, but it's a perfect line.
I can't hear you over the sound of the nuclear accelerator.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so funny. And Paul Rudd's like, that was so cool. But there's a couple of really obvious things that are kind of markers. The H&M we've already talked about, but there's a pizza place that has these two pizza flags with like Italian flags outside the front.
Yeah.
And there's a MasterCard building on the street. And it's a very distinctive kind of yellow looking stone. I know they graded everything to make it look a bit more yellowy and a bit more hot and summery. And part of that was because they had to film through all of that Canadian dust storm that came through New York.
It's still amazing to me how much they were able to filter that out and what they shot.
Amazing.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But I think it lent itself partly to that yellow look of the movie, because I have footage of me walking down Fifth Avenue onto 14th Street and filming down towards World Trade. And it looks like an apocalypse. It's just looks like Mad Max has arrived in New York. That's the color palette. But yeah, so you do see those flags a couple of times in some of those close-up shots. If you're incredibly sad like me and have watched the filming shots frequently, there's a couple of times where I'm like, wait, that's not where you were. And it's also and in general, they do make that trip downtown. You see them towards the Brooklyn Bridge and all of that. It holds together quite well from a continuity point of view. But they filmed so much stuff without the car. You know, they filmed with camera cards with a boom on it. They had this little three-wheeler stunt thing. It was a super fast electric car that they used. They had just like an electric base with a frame on it. They had so many different kind of filming devices.
I was thinking about how much they probably had to film just of traffic to do things like to composite in things for the drone sequence. You know, like you can CG some of that and it's going to look good, but in terms of other elements of it, you're going to want to be able to composite in to make it look authentic. But to be real, like as much as you're like, I'm a sad nerd who's looking at things, like, no, like I'm watching the movie. I've seen the movie 4 times. And when I watch the movie, during that opening sequence, my brain goes, McKenna Grace, AC Martin, McKenna Grace, AC Martin. Like, and that's, which is by no means, it's like nothing negative about the stunt team. Like, that's not really, I think, what you want to happen as somebody who's like coordinating stunts. You don't want people to be able to spot the two. But as hardcore nerds, I'm like, this is her, this is the other person, this is the person, this is the other person. Like,
totally. And having chatted briefly with her on set, awesome human, just fantastic to spend time with me and Martin? My kids. Yes. Oh, just a lovely person. Yeah, just fantastic. But yeah, and I've chatted with her on Instagram a few times. She's very humble about everything that she's done in the movie. But I think all of us Ghostbusters folks are like, you're awesome. Yeah, she should stand up and take a big bow and a big round of applause from all the Ghostbusters fans for risking her life by hanging out of the side of the Ecto on the streets of New York.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's pretty cool. Like, it's not just like, oh, we did this on a soundstage. It's like literally they were on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of June. Like, we're just going to strap you to the side of a car and drive you through New York City. No big whoop. Like,
I know.
Yeah.
Crazy. And the interesting thing is you said that you can tell because, again, we've been looking at all this pre-content and on set filming. They do this very strategic thing of placing a lens flare from the end of the positron thrower right over her face.
Yes, they do.
So you can't see her face. But I was so impressed with the quality. I mean, this is a no-brainer, obvious point because they're stunt doubles and they're also doubles, right?
Right.
So their costumes, their hair, everything was so immaculately accurate to the characters they were doubling. And I know that, you know, it's hard to make it perfect, but like from a distance and when you're seeing these shots, I'm almost certain that one of the reverse angles looks like it was actually the stunt team because on the Saturday, funnily enough, it was a Father's Day, the Sunday that we went down and shot. And I said to my wife, my Father's Day treat is going to be going to New York at 5 a.m. in the morning to watch them film Ghostbusters. But they were putting camera equipment inside the car to get an actual real reverse angle. But yeah, so they were getting shots with this camera out of the windshield. And I may be wrong, but there's a shot that to me looks like it's a reverse angle of the stunt driver because
Gotcha.
Paul Rudd's hands are on the steering wheel, completely clasped, thumbs under, and then when it cuts to the reverse, the thumbs are on the top,
Gotcha.
which I'm pretty sure was a stunt driver's hand.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that is the extent of my utter sadness of detailed knowledge.
No, this is not. Well, first of all, that will not be the extent of your utter sadness of your knowledge, I'm sure, because you are a person who's shot this much footage that you will think of other things that are equally sad. No, they're not sad at all. I love them. They're great. That's the other reason going to say is nothing about that is sad. I love that. This is like what I'm so excited about having a new Ghostbusters movie. Is that like we have more stuff to be total nerds about in this way?
Right.
Like people listening
Totally.
are like, dude, you're like ripping the movie apart. You're nitpicking, like you're finding continuity errors. Like I've been doing that since I was a child and I love this movie. Like I watched the actual first movie with my dad on AMC of all things. Like I felt so weird.
Right.
I was like hanging out at my parents' house a week before the premiere. I'm in my 40s now. My dad and I would have been watching that movie when he worked in a video store when I was a kid on VHS, and like pointing out things about it in the pan and scan version. And Dana Barrett is floating in front of us. And I just look at him and I go, do you see him? And he goes, see what? And I was like, there and there. Do you see him? You see the two cables? He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, I'm still doing it. Right. So it's like, I'm excited to have more stuff to talk about. It's really great. I think it's cool that you were there and saw a lot of what was going on from that second unit, because one of the things that I thought was the most heartwarming and touching thing about that, and you talk about this idea that like they were done up meticulously to look, exactly the part. They are not
Right.
just there like, filming something in Spirit Halloween costumes, be like, we got the car, we got to kind of look right. Like they are, for all intents and purposes, stand-ins for our main heroes. They're doing what accounts for hero scene work. Like the car is having its hero moment, even if our characters are not, and they are there to sort of facilitate that. But one of the coolest things, I just want to see what you thought about this, that I thought happened during that was I was so heartwarmed by this, was watching those actors take the time in the sweltering heat of June on Father's Day in flight suits to engage kids and fans. Like there were all these photos that came out of like AC Martin in the Phoebe flight suit. She's like in the chair, like bolted in. And here's like these little kids from like just walking down the street who are like walking up and hi, shaking your hand and say hello. Like, I don't know, just what was your take on that? Did you see a lot of that happening while they were shooting, where they were letting sort of like kids and young fans get a glimpse of what was going on?
So I think there were two things that I saw. I think first of all, in the main, the real fans that were down there to see it, not just the people that wandered past, were incredibly respectful of the shoot.
Yeah.
And, were, because I kind of made the joke about it, is that, again, having been a filmmaker and shot on a public street, people seem to think they're going to get in the movie by waving at the behind the camera. I'm like, you're just going to be cut out. Because, by the way, this scene does not call for somebody to break the fourth wall and wave.
Right.
So if you want to be in the movie, just walk through shot and let us do our thing. And, I was kind of joking, like the fans want this movie to be made. So we're staying out of the way. We want them to get on, and because the quicker they can do this job, the quicker we can watch it in theaters.
Right.
So I think that was a very real thing. And then I think that, when they weren't busy, because they were obviously the schedule's incredibly busy, and anyone that's been on a film set knows this, right? It's hurry up and stand still.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the way it goes. So there's always something going on, and the production assistants, especially on the Saturday, I mention it in my video, but oh my gosh, they're trying to manage Saturday foot traffic on Fifth Avenue.
On Fifth Avenue, right.
On a summer's day.
Right.
These production assistants were incredible. But again, everyone was so nice to us. The production assistants were nice to us. There was one point where Martin and I were, we'd found a place to stand kind of out of the way, that one of the production assistants came and just gave us something to drink because they recognized we'd been around a long time. They said, yeah, have some water. The water was for the crew.
Right.
They gave it to us. So nice. And so, yeah, I think that was the one aspect. And the other aspect was when the moment was right, and when there were people gathered, particularly kids who were interested and excited, they would make the efforts to speak to people. I think they recognized they were making something special in a very special city. You know, I mean, Nick says it to me. We're chatting in the video, but he says, you know, I've never seen a Ghostbusters movie film before. Have you? You know, here we are in New York, you know, looking at a screen-used Ecto at the firehouse, and we're like, wow, we're watching them make a Ghostbusters movie. And so, you know, I already loved the movie because I'd been there, right? So I was never going to hate it because I was just like, I saw this happen. I saw the love that went into crafting this.
Sure.
But yeah, they were great. All of them were great at being what I'm going to call appropriately available, because they weren't there, you know, for an autograph session. They weren't there for the premiere. It was a totally different mode. Yeah, they were working, but when it was appropriate and when they were on downtime waiting for, you know, visual effects or other parts of the team to do stuff, then they absolutely leaned into making people feel welcome. I never once, the entire time I was on location filming, right? I was filming stuff. I never felt unwelcome.
Yeah.
I never felt like they didn't want me there. And hopefully that was also because I was trying to keep an appropriate distance and not get up in their faces.
It's kind of interesting to consider this, that like the first Ghostbusters movie gets shot in a very guerrilla style in New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
The third Ghostbusters movie, I mean, all right, the 2016 movie doesn't really happen in New York at all, obviously. Like most of that content was shot in Boston. And then you look at Afterlife, they were filming in Canada, and the only thing you get from New York from that entire movie is like a drone shot essentially of the Ecto-1 driving across the bridge, which isn't even real, I don't think. I'm pretty sure that we've talked about this in the podcast before, that is a reappropriation of previously used footage of the bridge, and then the Ecto-1 is CGI'd onto it. So like,
wouldn't surprise me in the least. No,
like, I don't think they shot anything in New York like for Afterlife. So it was odd that like this return to New York City happens with this movie almost 40 years later. And there is no longer an ability to shoot in a guerrilla style. Like you can't bring the Ecto-1 anywhere in New York City and film.
Unless you're filming Ghost Tours of New York, like with a GoPro.
Yes, then you can shoot in a guerrilla style, right?
And have to move out of the way for traffic.
But even then, everybody's going to recognize that you're there doing something, right?
Totally.
Like, because everybody recognizes the car.
An instant crowd. Yeah.
Whereas, like, you know, in 1983, when they're filming that movie for an 84 release, nobody knows what the hell's going on. What's this white Cadillac going down the street with lights on? Who knows what that is?
Nobody's seen the Ghostbusters logo before. I mean, try and wrap your head around that. That was just nobody knew what that was.
So it's like, I would love to talk with those folks at some point, because like they had this odd responsibility of not just, you know, filming these very important stunt sequences, but also in a strange way of being like the stewards of Ghostbusters as a filmmaking enterprise in New York City for the first time in almost 40 years. Like was a thing, you know? So I think it's a really fascinating thing, you know?
With the backdrop of a looming strike. I mean, that was the last thing to shoot in New York. And then nothing shot in New York for a huge period of time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because there are plenty of Twitter threads and other places you can go online to people wander around the city. And again, people that aren't familiar with New York, just to describe it, they put these signs up on the street on, you know, the lampposts to state that you can't park in a certain place on a certain day because they're shooting something, and they put the name of the production. It's like an official form that has to be filled out, and it's all dealt with through, you know, through the city. But it gives people a tip off to what's shooting on what date.
Right.
And so there are a lot of feeds online where you can go, and people that live in the city or live on those blocks will post the photograph. And of course, this one was Firehouse. Mm-hmm. But, you know, those boards are always busy because stuff's always being shot in New York, always being shot in New York. And for them to be quiet literally the day after, I mean, it was almost the day after Ghostbusters wrapped in New York City that everyone went on strike. So it was kind of I even spoke to there was a bunch of guys that were, you know, electrical grips and others that were, you know, waiting in some of the vans down the street. And I was chatting to them, and they were talking about the strike, and how quickly it was going to shut them down and their fears about having no work,
Right.
So, yeah. But yeah, you're right. An amazing. And the other thing I was going to say, that is the most action we've ever had with the Ecto in a Ghostbusters movie.
Yes. Yes.
That we've never, ever in the original movie seen the car drive in that way.
No.
Ever. And we know it's been tricked out to help that. And, I know you've spoken to Nick and Greg, who are the, experts on the car stuff. But that was the other funny thing down at the firehouse. There was the three of us stood in a line just staring at this car. We'd never seen what I call the armadillo on the top of the car, which is the
drone, right.
the launcher for the drone. We were like, "What is this? What is that? Why are the stripes going all the way to the front? Why have they moved the AC thing back and have changed the configuration on the top? Where's the dish? All these things we were talking about." And we talked earlier about detail. One of the things I captured that was so cool was that the armadillo or the drone launcher was a mechanical prop. It actually worked. So it soft opened, just like we see it do in the movie. And I'm assuming that shot was a studio shot based on, they didn't do any side shots or anything. But I even was able to capture the instructions. There's a key fob that opens and closes it. and it was connected to these laminated sheets that had very detailed instructions from, because the prop was obviously not made by the people that were using it on set. It would have been made by a prop house and then handed over to a prop master who would have been in charge of those props, kind of like Ben Eady did on Afterlife, So Ben didn't make the props, but then it was his responsibility to maintain them. And if something needed to be made on set, then he would be in charge of making that and creating it. And that was a very similar thing, I'm assuming, on the New York shoot. But it was cool to see this. It felt like a 20-page document of instructions on how to open this drone launcher. But back to the attention to detail, right? Based on what we actually got in the film, that probably wasn't necessary. But they went to that level of effort to ensure that everything they had in the city was spot on. Even, we never see any packs in the back of the car, right? In the film, we just see Phoebe's gunner seat,
right? Yeah,
but there were packs in the back of that car, and I saw them bring them in boxes, load them, and they cable tied them into the back of the car so they wouldn't move around. And you think, well, I'm never going to see that, but there'll be, somebody like us on a podcast somewhere. If they hadn't done that, saying, I noticed that when the car goes past in this 3-second moment, there is nothing in the back.
So were they just out on a bus and they were hoping to catch it in a net? What was the plan?
Exactly. Exactly. So, amazing. Just incredible the amount of detail they went to in that shot. They did not skimp on that New York shoot at all. And even though Gil wasn't there, the second unit was firing on all cylinders to get both shots of the car and all the green screen material that they needed to, replace that with the effects they needed.
I think that's the thing that people didn't really anticipate or think about at the time. Like, there were days where shooting was going to be happening and I would hear about it. And, obviously I was not in New York, so I was never going to go down anywhere. But like, I would hear, oh, they're going to be shooting, but there's not really going to be anything to see. You go, well, how does that work? Like, how can you not have anything to see when you're shooting a movie? But the reason was because what they were shooting was all this composite stuff, all these stills, right? Or just B-roll
100%.
of the city, of traffic, of other stuff that like they needed to capture in order to recreate New York City, which I think they do, a reasonable job of in this movie, that you get the sense that the movie happens in New York, even though so little of it was actually filmed even in the United States.
I agree. And being somebody that now is, you very kindly called me now somebody that lives in New York, more of a local than I certainly was 6 years ago. But I didn't feel jarred by anything that was created for that movie. Even shots that we know were massively CGI supported, like the library, right? They built a set of the library steps and the first maybe 6 feet of the library facade,
right?
But the reverse angle shot that we saw a lot of, which was where Podcast was with the bike, with the Ecto C, that was all green screen, and
right?
They had to capture, everything photographically, and then recreate it 3-dimensionally, which is a whole process. And again, once I'd watched the footage I'd captured a few times, I started to piece it together in my head. Yeah, the reason they're taking this high resolution still photography on DSLR cameras is they're stitching this together. They're not trying to get video. They want the highest quality still that they possibly can, and then they're going to wrap that onto a 3D model that they're going to use to replace that background. And that's what they were doing everywhere in the city. I mean, I'd love to see, I'm sure we'll get to see, right, the level of detail they had to go to in creating those 3D models of New York.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the drone footage, there's plenty of ordinances in New York City now about flying drones. And I may be wrong. I didn't see them flying any drones. Maybe they did on one occasion or another, but that's not a small feat to allow that, which is probably why, as you said, that shot of the car was CG in the other movie, because getting permission to fly a drone over a bridge in New York is, it was easier a few years ago. And now it's not something that you can do easily at all. So
I wish I could remember what movie it was from, because I forget where I heard it, but I think it might have been in the Big Head Club NFT Q&A that they did a while back. It was like a Discord thing that happened for the Big Head Club NFT holders. That it might have been during that Jason Reitman talked about the idea that was not actually the Ecto-1 driving over the bridge. And I went, what? And I forget, maybe, you know what it was? I think it might have been, I'm sure somebody can confirm what the last time I talked about this in the podcast and email me, but I think it might have been for the Venom movie. Like, I think that's what he said they pulled it, because another Sony property. It was like a thing they had in like a, like in a collection of B-roll and area shots and aerial photography they'd done for Venom. Yeah. So. Yeah, that makes sense. But that's then they CG the Ecto onto the bridge that they already had the footage of, right? Yeah.
Right.
So.
And that's no small feat when you think about it, by the way, because that bridge has a lot of iron or steel, bars. Yeah. And so you're having to create the Ecto, and then you've got to rotoscope out every piece of steel that's going in front of the camera. I bet that shot was a huge undertaking, and it was, not a shot that was in the film.
It's also why they did it from really up high. They could be like, we could cheat this.
Again, I feel like we're veering into the Corridor Crew version of Extraplasm here with the breaking down of the visual effects.
What we're going to have to do at some point is we have to do a version of that. We should do an entire episode where we just break down visual effects shots. That would be really fun.
We should do it. I'd love to do that.
We could do that like as a YouTube panel and do that. So let's put that on our list of things to do in the next 6 months. But there's one other thing I wanted to ask you about that you had an opportunity to do that you attended. You said earlier that you got to go to Wonderverse, like that's where you got to meet McKenna Grace, right? What was your feel on that? How did you feel about the Wonderverse experience and what that offers to folks?
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, again, I'm going to be biased here, but I think the best part of it is the bar, the Ghostbusters piece. I got a chance to go there. It was interesting actually because we went down early with the car before the opening, because the car was actually there for a number of weeks before the grand opening.
Right.
And so we got to see it, and I got video of it, but I didn't release it because I didn't, Sony wants to show it finished. There are a few clips of it in my Wonderverse video that have a very big subtitle saying "under construction." But we were there just before previews were going to begin, and so it was really interesting to see the way it had changed from the time we were there when they were still really under construction to the time that we were there for the actual proper opening. And it's an interesting thing now. I think a lot of these places do this, and I think it's very sensible. They have this kind of soft opening period.
Right.
And for anything that's a live venue, like my job is running experiential events, right? And so anything that involves people is complicated. Anything. Mm-hmm. And so getting a sense of the rhythm of where people are going to move through a space, how that's going to work, how you're going to manage catering, how you're going to manage food, where the problems are going to be, having the ability to kind of advertise that as, hey, we're open, we're not finished, but we'd love you to come and participate in helping us to figure out this stuff. They even do it with theme parks now. I mean, Universal did it with the Velocicoaster. They opened that early, and I got to go see that and have that experience. And it's different now to what it was when I went there first, the way they manage the line. But
it's a thing that a Wonka thing definitely totally should have done.
Oh my gosh!
Those
SNL,
people ran a soft opening as their event. But
you know what? It was funny. I think SNL did something on that over the weekend. They used the Wonka event as part of a skit on Airbnb, and it was really funny. It was a very funny skit. You should check it out. But yeah, so yeah, I went there for the soft opening. That was really interesting, and so they'd added a lot of extra what I call space dressing to the bar.
Okay.
By the time I got there, and the bar's really great because we had a chance to chat to the creative director ahead of time, and they have these cool things that I'm not sure I've seen a lot of people share. It's in my video. It's not kind of featured, but there's a whole wall with card drawers like in the library.
Yeah, I've heard about
and
this.
So you can pull them out. Some of them don't open, but there are some that do open. And then when you open them, there's like kind of cool little things in them, which was fun. And then they've got artifacts from Ghostbusters on the shelf. They've got like mood slime and other bits and pieces. And the other thing that's really interesting is they have portraits on the wall. And I'm probably going to get this wrong, and someone's going to write in and tell you that I got this wrong, and that's fine. But I'm pretty sure that it's Vigo, the Ghostbusters in the final Vigo painting, and then they have a painting that's on the wall of the Manhattan Adventurers Club, or the New York Adventurers Club, which is the guy looking very colonial, with his kind of jungle pith helmet and blunderbuss.
We think it's supposed to be Ivo Shandor. We think like that's. They didn't
interesting.
say it in the movie, but that's what I've heard is that's supposed to be Ivo Shandor.
Interesting. So. But yeah, that was there well before the movie. So they'd obviously taken that artwork and put it in. And then the other thing that was very cool to see them doing in the previews, that they still hadn't even got the projection set up and they were working on it. And it was really fun to see them setting that up because while you're in the bar, Muncher comes and kind of gnaws on the sides of some of the paintings. And then there's the, and I can't remember the name of the ghost now off the top of my head, the one from Real Ghostbusters that's in Afterlife with the big eye.
Oh, Bug-Eye Ghost.
Thank you. Yeah, Bug-Eye Ghost is also one of the ghosts that's featured. So yeah, it's just a really fun atmosphere in there. And then they have this side room that you go into, and it's really just a cool opportunity to see somebody that's decided to design a chandelier that's made entirely of ghost traps. I mean, that's a cool, like, what's the perfect thing that we can use to hang from the ceiling? It's going to be a cool lighting thing. And they have this kind of ghost trap chandelier, and then you've got a containment unit, and you've got some packs on the wall and other little bits and pieces. It's just a really fun to kind of hang out in there and feel part of that Ghostbusters world. And then the VR experiences are fun as well, like driving the Ecto through the streets of New York is really fun. So yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. And again, I mean, I said this to you, I haven't said it on the podcast, but we were chatting about it before, but that was the first time I'd ever had a chance to speak to McKenna or kind of watch her with fans. And I was so impressed with the attention that she gave everybody.
Yeah.
It was really, really impressive. And having then met her and chatted to her again at the Yes Have Some preview party for the premiere, and at the Firehouse before the premiere, she's the same everywhere she goes.
Yeah.
Has that positive energy. She's super enthusiastic. She's excited to see fans and talk to them. And so that was a really fun night having her there, and the fact we managed to get her down to sign the Ecto was super fun. She was very excited about that. Nick did try and get her. I think he probably said this in the other podcast that you had with him, but he did try. We did all try to get her to drive the car.
Yeah,
and
he's
and even her mum was like, "Do it, McKenna, do it." Yeah,
he's talked about this with me, about that she was kind of in the position to kind of be like, "You should drive the car," and then she was for it. Then she kind of was like, I don't know if I should do this or not."
Yeah, it was just a very. I mean, I have teenage girls, and yeah, that whole interaction between her and her mum reminded me of my interactions with my kids. And it was just a very real moment, which is what I really liked about it. Because, you know, I could suddenly see that she was, you know, obviously feeling a bit of the pressure to drive this thing, and she really didn't want to wreck it. So
right. I would be afraid to wreck it. I'm in my 40s and I'd be afraid to drive it.
Right. Exactly. Hey, I haven't driven it. I've sat in the front seat, but I've not driven it. I don't want to wrap that. I want to stay friends with Nick.
Yes. Right. There's that part of it. There's the like not wanting to create bodily harm part of it. There's the knowing that the glass for the car is unobtainable. So
right.
The fact that he even brings it out on the street is amazing.
It is amazing. It is.
So I guess the question I'll ask you to sort of wrap things up here, and we can kind of talk about, you know, where people should go find your content, is did you ever imagine when you started a YouTube channel where you made a rocket ship in a garage that you would find yourself in a community of hardcore Ghostbusters fans and have the opportunity to film a premiere or, you know, anything around it, or to film, you know, a Ghostbusters movie that was being made? Did you ever anticipate this is where YouTube could lead you?
No, not even the slightest, vaguest idea. Yeah, I mean, back then, you know, we just had, I think it was around the same time as Answer the Call, and you know, after that, I wondered if we'd ever have any more Ghostbusters, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we all probably felt that way. And so, yeah, I didn't even know then I would be moving to the US. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy to me. And I think, I can't remember if I said it on the podcast or to you before this, but I feel really grateful for having been welcomed so openly into this community of awesome folks, who, you know, I'll just say it again, it's, you know, been wonderful meeting people. Surprising for me to meet people at the firehouse that have seen my videos, which was amazing to me, just crazy to me. People say, "Oh, are you the guy from? You're Matt from Experience Explorers." Yeah, that's me. You know, somebody from Australia, somebody from England. You know, people from Germany. It's kind of crazy. You know, and just so grateful for that, and so grateful really to Sony and to Eric for, you know, allowing me to be part of it, and, you know, for Nick, for including me in the, you know, the Ecto 1NJ team. You know, it's just opened so many doors and given me so many opportunities to create fun content. And I'm sure, just like for you, right, Jim, you know, you do this because you love it, but you also do it because you know other people love it and you want to share it with that group. And without an audience, a podcast is nothing, right?
Right. Yeah.
without an audience, a YouTube video is nothing. And so I'm always thinking about that audience, and it's so deeply gratifying when people engage with that content and tell you that they're enjoying it and that they like it, and that gives you more opportunities and more enthusiasm and energy to go and do more of that stuff. And so grateful for that, and here's to more. Here's to more of it.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that you have more stuff that you have an opportunity to put out that you've captured that maybe we haven't seen yet. I
got some stuff.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm like, what else you got in the hopper? I know you got to have something else over there. After all, as I've been told, you know, I told you off air, we'll kind of talk about this for a second, that Nick's name for you when I told him you were going to be on the podcast was, "Oh, good, I love British Matt." Which I thought was so funny because you've been given British Matt. There's many Matts
British
out
Matt.
there, but
I'm
you know,
British Matt.
Yes, there's many Matts. You're British Matt. But the other thing you have also been described as with the first time I ever talked about you with Nick, he was like, "Oh yeah, that's my video guy." I love the idea that you are British Matt, the video guy. You could just put that on some business cards and hand them out to people.
I think that'd be great. I should do that. British Matt, the video guy. And I should say, I don't want to say too much about it, but, you know, teasing stuff coming up. You know, we do have if everything lines up the way we hope, we do have a cool project coming up with Ecto 1NJ and the 40th anniversary. that, you know, we're hoping that we can pull together. And again, I don't want to kind of spoil it here, but keep your eyes open. I think it's going to be a really fun one. And there may or may not be a live stream very soon.
Oh, okay.
That will reveal more about that with Nick, Greg, and I about what we're planning to do. But it's will be around the topic of creating some video content that's based around the 40th anniversary.
Awesome. I'm excited. I'm eager to see that. I'm also hopeful to be able to see you all again sometime soon, because coming to New York has made me just want to come back. So I mean, it may be the whole riding around in an Ecto-1 thing. It may have had a rubbed off. Like, wait, if I come back here, I can do this again. That's a thing. You can ride the ride more than once. I had no idea.
I don't think you're gonna. I think if you just happen to turn up at the workshop, I don't think you'd have any trouble getting another ride in the Ecto. I think we can arrange that.
I think if I showed up at the airport, I would not have any trouble. I think I would call and be like, "Yeah, no, we're coming to get you. That's fine."
Where's my normal Uber? My Uber doesn't look like a Prius normally. It looks like an Ecto. What's going on here?
Right. Yeah. Well, hey, if you're using the Waze app, you can actually achieve that. You know, the Waze app right now has the ability for you to turn your logo on your car in the Waze app into an Ecto-1. And then Dan Aykroyd is actually the voice that tells you things like, in 500 feet, turn left. The PKE in this environment is very strong as you drive along in your car. The psychokinetic reactions in this household are very spooky as you roll into your driveway or something. I don't know. I used it for like 15 minutes and I was like, okay, I'm done. I had enough. But if you used it inside that car, it would actually be the most realistic representation of the Ecto-1 inside a GPS navigation system. There you go.
We should do that and then connect it to the PA on the car so everyone outside can hear the directions from Wise with Dan Aykroyd saying all of his what only Dan Aykroyd can do is explain with such enthusiasm spiritually based, you know, science. It's just, in fact, what he does best in this most recent movie.
I personally feel that it needs just a smidge more of him saying something like, the psychokinetic energy inside this particular lane of traffic is very out of control right now, cadet. Move over 2 lanes to your right. Like just giving you random directions about which lanes to be in and all kinds of other stuff. It would be great. So look, you're in the ideal position with them to film a promo for this. I'm just saying.
Hey, I'm available. Look, if Ghost Corps are listening, I'm up for anything. My thirst for behind the scenes is peaked. And for creating any Ghostbusters content, I can make myself available.
Look, I'm done with behind the scenes. Right, I'm about the scenes now. Okay,
like the scenes, making the scenes. Yeah, fair enough. Graduate from behind the sines to the scenes.
Well, I believe that even if you continue to shoot behind the scenes, the stuff you'll bring us is cool and amazing. And I really want to encourage folks who have not seen this stuff already, go over to Experience Explorers on YouTube. Go and take a look at what Matt has already put out there, especially the videos that have come out over the last month. You have stuff from the premiere. You have stuff, of the content that you got, a couple videos that you call like revealing the hidden secrets of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, that are behind the scenes videos of that content being shot, back in June. So you've got a lot of great stuff over there. You've got more to come for people to take a look at, especially as you're doing more to document what's going on with Ecto-1NJ. And as Ecto-1NJ gets like more opportunities to do things representing the franchise, don't forget, like for folks listening out there, that's the car that represented the franchise for EHP Labs. That's the car that represented the franchise for Wonderverse. It's the car that was Matt Cardona's valet, although that wasn't necessarily officially licensed. Matt Cardona was at the premiere and we did interview him with Ghostbusters News. So, I mean, it's kind of canon, but it's really great. I
really get him a t-shirt, a canon t-shirt.
Yes, a canon t-shirt. That's what I need now. Is need Matt Cardona to be canon within the Ghostbusters universe. If like real Ghostbusters is and like Kenner toys are, why can't Matt Cardona be canon in the Ghostbusters universe? I'm for it. So
we need to find a way. He needs to, at the very least, open a door like Bobby Brown did in Ghostbusters 2. Something.
No, I think that there should be the next Ghostbusters movie opens and Paul Rudd's character is trying to bust a wrestling ghost. And Matt Cardona plays the ghost, right? So he's just being thrown around a ring by a ghost that's like half the time invisible and then just becomes like half corporeal and power bombs him into the floor. If you're listening, anybody out there at Ghost Corps, take notes. I got a great idea.
I have to see that scene. That is great. And Paul Rudd would act the response to that so perfectly.
Yeah.
And then, I'm always up for new tech in Ghostbusters. So, do we need some kind of, ring that actually is a trap? I don't know, what new piece of technology can we create? It's going to be like those lasers in Ghostbusters 2. They're the corners of the ring.
No, you know what it
the
is?
The lasers catch the ghost.
In the WWE, they have that match called the Hell in a Cell. Well,
oh, yeah.
This is a scrap and a trap. It's a giant laser containment grid. Only one being will leave.
That is amazing. Yeah. Now, hopefully Sony marketing are listening to this, because this is how we should promote the next movie. I'm just saying. I mean,
this is the plot to the next movie. Obviously, the next movie has to involve like a wrestling championship. This is
totally
what we're doing now.
And even if it doesn't, right, we know that most of what they put out from a marketing point of view is not going to be in the movie anyway. So just make a scene up and promote the movie with that.
This has been a lot of fun, Matt. And if nothing else, you have a new video project I just gave you. That's your job if nobody else makes it.
I think that's my next text messaging relationship with Matt Cardona. So we need you at a ring that will look a little bit like a ghost trap. Don't worry if the floor opens up and light comes out of the center.
The ropes are yellow and black and alternating diagonal patterns. Just be advised.
Right. And if you go outside of them, we've got slime guns ready to douse you, to make you go back into the ring. This is how we roll now. And
there's a kid who has a giant mallet that he will hit you with.
Yeah, because it's all about the views. The mallet gets the views.
They better add some tech to that so it can be a ghost busting hammer.
Right. That would be great, right? Some kind of little accelerator in a backpack, and when you hit it on something, it makes this kind of little burst of lightning.
Or it just opens up on the ends and becomes a trap, and you just whack the ghost into the trap.
There you go.
It's like
that's
whack-a-mole.
What should have happened. Podcast should have got up on the ceiling and then, like, from behind, whacked Garaka on the head with this mallet, and it opened up, and it was a trap. That's what we should have had as the ending. Gil, what were you thinking? Jason, what were you thinking when you didn't come up with that idea?
It's the boson hammer. I don't know.
We have to be really careful. If they listen to this, they're never going to listen to any of our ideas again. That's the problem. Those guys.
Let's be real. No one should listen to most of my ideas anyway. Many of them are half baked.
Jim and Matt are now working
delicious.
on a new Ghostbusters script. This is what's happening. This is going to be Ghostbusters 5. Ghostbusters 5.
Ghostbusters 5, the wrestling championship. That's what it's about. Yeah, I mean, look, this is why we are going to have to contact Kurt Fuller. Like, he was Jack Hardemeyer in Ghostbusters 2, but we can bring him back now and he can be Brill from No Holds Barred. And we can have an entire, like, Ghostbusters No Holds Barred merging universe. Like, clearly these are the best Ghostbusters ideas for the best ideas for movies. Nobody's ever had a better one.
No. No. Nobody's ever will either. This is the peak. This is the peak of Ghostbusters ideas right now.
Yeah.
This is the peak of the point where people are like, I've had enough of these guys. I'm turning off now.
This is where we killed the podcast. We were like, hey, we're just going to lean into really terrible ideas and come on, just keep. But that being said, scrapping a trap, it's a good idea. I'm just saying, scrapping a trap. Matt, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm glad we got to finally, talk one-on-one on a webcam after meeting face-to-face, which doesn't happen for most people. Most people come on the podcast, get to have this experience first, and then they meet me in person, and they go, well, that was underwhelming. So hopefully, this was not an underwhelming experiance. I'm kidding.
No, it's great. You're right. No, you're right. I met you, I said hi, and then I shoved a camera in your face. That was basically it. Talk to me. Introduce yourself.
So that's what's funny. We didn't talk about this, but just real fast, I actually had somebody in my life who who's not a Ghostbusters fanatic at all, and who's significantly older than all of us, messaged me and was like, I'm on YouTube and you're in this video. And it was your video.
No, that's hilarious.
Like, for whatever reason, it got recommended to them. It's like,
oh, wow.
I don't know, because I don't know, maybe my name was in the description or something. I don't know. But they saw it and they messaged me and they were like, you're in this video of this thing. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be in a lot of videos. I was riding in that car. I was like, that's...
That is funny, man.
Hey, if you keep making videos of that car and I come back and ride in it, maybe I can be in some more. Until
Let's do
then,
it. Let's make it happen. Yeah.
Let's do that. But until then, I hope you'll come back and visit us with us again soon. Everybody should go over to Experience Explorers on YouTube. Go like, follow, subscribe, ring the bell, and other verbiage that means go and support this person who makes cool stuff. And Matt, thank you so much for coming on Extraplasm and joining us this week.
What a pleasure. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Anything else you want to add or anything else for people to go check out before we sign off?
No, it's beautiful. Thank you.
All right.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun for sure. Thank you for doing it, and we'll talk to you again soon. That about wraps things up for Extraplasm this week. I want to say one final thank you to Matt Daniels for coming on the show and sharing so much of his story with us, and of course for doing such a great job of shooting behind the scenes footage of Ecto 1, for partnering up and doing a great job of capturing ghost tours with Ecto 1NJ. Make sure you're going and taking a look at his content over at Experience Explorers on YouTube, because he's got a ton of great stuff for you to take a look at. I also want to say thank you as usual to Brendan Pearce of Badoochi Studios, who provides our logo and our visual identity for the podcast, as well as vaporwave artist MAGNAVOX, whose version of Ghostbusters serves as our theme song each week. And of course, I got to thank you, because it would not be a particularly interesting podcast if you were not here as an audience to listen to it. I've heard so much from a ton of you after your Frozen Empire experiences and what you think about the movie. A bunch of you have shared things for me to take a look at in my future viewings that I've totally appreciated. Shout out to those of you who told me things like, look for the fire behind Kumail at the beginning of the movie, or look for Podcast Patch and see what happens with it by the end of the movie. There's a whole bunch of different Easter eggs and things that I really do think it would be fun to do, like a visual criticism episode like Matt and I were talking about. So if you have more tips, if you have more things you're noticing as you're watching the movie, or if you just got something to share with the podcast, you can of course reach me at Extraplasm on Instagram, on X, via email. You can reach me at extraplasompodcast@gmail.com. And of course you can find the podcast on Facebook at Extraplasm Podcast, or you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@extraplasompodcast. So thank you so much for tuning in each week. I hope that you're having a blast as we kind of come out of Frozen Empire and see where we're headed next with the comic book. Don't be a stranger. Feel free to be in contact. And as Ernie Hudson says every week,
Try to have fun and always keep on busting. Take care.